A cryptic letter lures Hercule Poirot to Blackthorn Manor, where a glittering gala hides a deadly web of lies. A stolen sapphire, a locked room murder, and a poisoned glass point to a cunning killer. Among the guests a gruff colonel, a heiress, a theatrical playwright, or a secretive governess. What is the secret tool, whispered in shadows, and how does it unlock a decades-old betrayal? As Poirot's little gray cells unravel clues or crimson threads, coded diaries, hidden vaults, each twist tightens the noose. Will he expose the mastermind before the manor's secrets claim another life? Dive into a puzzle where truth meets shadow, and every lie has a price. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. In the crisp autumn of 1928, Hercule Poirot sat in his London flat, the morning light filtering through the heavy drapes of his study. The room was a testament to his meticulous nature. Polished mahogany, shelves lined with books, a crystal inkstand gleaming on his desk, and a single orchid in a porcelain vase, its petals as precise as Poirot's own mustache. He sipped his tisane, savoring the warmth, when his housekeeper, Mrs. Wren, entered with a silver tray bearing a single letter. "Monsieur Poirot, this arrived by the morning post," she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. "It's marked urgent, and the envelope, well, it's rather grand." Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, studied the envelope. It was of heavy cream stock, sealed with crimson wax, embossed with a crest of thorned rose entwined with a serpent. The address was written in an elegant, looping script: Hercule Poirot, ESQ, 14B, Whitehaven Mansions, London. He broke the seal with a letter opener, his movements deliberate, and unfolded the letter within. "Dear Monsieur Poirot, your reputation as a detective of unparalleled acumen precedes you. I am Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, mistress of Blackthorn Manor in Devonshire. I request your presence at a weekend gathering at my estate, commencing this Friday. The matter is delicate, requiring your utmost discretion. I fear a shadow looms over my household, and your little gray cells may be the only light to dispel it. A car will collect you at Paddington Station at noon. I trust you will not decline. Yours sincerely, Eleanor Blackthorn." Poirot's mustache twitched. A delicate matter and a shadow were phrases that piqued his interest, for they suggested intrigue beyond the ordinary. He glanced at the clock, 10:30. There was just enough time to pack his valise and summon his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, who was always eager for a mystery. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said when he reached him by telephone, "prepare yourself for a journey to Devonshire. We are invited to Blackthorn Manor, and I sense a puzzle most intriguing awaits us." Hastings, ever enthusiastic, arrived at Poirot's flat within the hour, his suitcase bulging with tweed suits and golfing gear. "Poirot, old chap, what's this all about? Some grand dame in distress, I wager." Poirot adjusted his tie in the mirror, his reflection impeccable. "Perhaps, Hastings, but Lady Blackthorn's words suggest more than distress, a threat. Perhaps, cloaked in the elegance of her prose. We shall see." The train to Devonshire was a blur of green fields and mist-shrouded hills. At Paddington, a sleek black Daimler awaited them, driven by a taciturn chauffeur in a peaked cap. The journey to Blackthorn Manor took them through winding lanes, past hedgerows heavy with lateberries, until the manor emerged from the fog like a specter. It was a sprawling Elizabethan pile, its stone facade, weathered yet grand, with ivy clinging to its turrets and mullioned windows glinting in the dusk. A butler, tall and gaunt, with eyes like polished obsidian, greeted them at the door. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he intoned, his voice as smooth as the marble floor. "I am Grayson, Lady Blackthorn's butler. Please, follow me." The entrance hall was a cavern of oak paneling and flickering candelabras. A grand staircase curved upward, flanked by portraits of stern-faced Blackthorns, their eyes seeming to follow Poirot as he ascended. Grayson led them to a drawing room, where a fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting shadows on tapestries, depicting hunting scenes. The air carried the scent of beeswax and old roses. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn stood by the fireplace, a vision of elegance in a burgundy gown, Her silver hair swept into a chignon. She was perhaps 60, her face etched with lines of determination rather than age. Her eyes, a piercing gray, met Poirot's with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming," she said, her voice low and melodic. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Most pleasant," Madame Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "But I confess, your letter has stirred my curiosity. What is this delicate matter that requires Hercule Poirot?" Lady Eleanor gestured to a velvet settee. "Please, sit. I shall introduce you to my guests shortly. But first, I must speak plainly. I believe someone in this house intends me harm. There have been incidents, letters, anonymous and threatening, objects misplaced, then found in strange places. I fear a plot, Monsieur Poirot, and I need your clarity to unravel it." Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Threatening letters, you say. Have you kept them?" Lady Eleanor nodded. "They are locked in my study. I shall show you later. But tonight, we dine with my guests, and I wish you to observe them. They are a varied lot, and I suspect the truth lies among them." The drawing-room door opened, and the other guests entered, their voices a murmur of polite anticipation. Poirot's eyes scanned each newcomer, his mind cataloging details with the precision of a WATCHMAKER. First was Colonel Rupert Hargrave, a retired military man with a bristling mustache and a limp he attributed to a Boer war wound. His ruddy complexion and booming voice suggested a man accustomed to command. Yet his eyes darted nervously when Lady Eleanor spoke. Next came Miss Beatrice Langley, a young heiress whose delicate features and emerald green dress belied a sharp tongue. She clutched a fan as if it were a shield, her gaze flitting between the others with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Mr. Julian Vance, a playwright of some repute, entered with a theatrical flourish. His dark hair was slicked back, and his velvet jacket screamed bohemian excess. He carried a notebook, scribbling observations with a silver pen, his smile charming but calculated. Finally, Miss Clara Wren, the governess to Lady Eleanor's absent nephew, glided in silently. Her plain gray dress and severe bun contrasted with her striking violet eyes, which seemed to see more than they revealed. She spoke little, her hands folded demurely, but Poirot noted a faint tremor in her fingers. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, a long chamber, lit by a chandelier that cast prisms of light across a table set with silver and crystal. The meal was exquisite: consomme, roasted pheasant, and a pear tart that Poirot declared a triumph of the culinary arts. Yet the conversation was strained, each guest guarding their words as if they were secrets. Colonel Hargrave regaled the table with tales of his campaigns, but Poirot noticed his hand tightened on his wineglass when Lady Eleanor mentioned her late husband, Sir Reginald Blackthorne, a fine man. "Sir Reginald," the colonel said gruffly. "His loss was a blow to us all." Beatrice Langley laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, Colonel, you speak as if you knew him better than his own wife. Tell me, did you ever visit his study? He kept such curious artifacts." Lady Eleanor's fork paused midair, her eyes narrowing. "Beatrice, mind your tongue. My husband's collections are not fodder for gossip." Julian Vance leaned forward, his smile sly. "But they are fascinating, Lady Eleanor. That obsidian dagger in the library, Egyptian, isn't it? One could write a play about such a relic." Miss Clara remained silent, her gaze fixed on her plate, but Poirot saw her flinch at the mention of the dagger. He made a mental note, his fingers brushing the small, leather-bound case in his Paquita custom magnifying lens, his secret tool for uncovering truths hidden in plain sight. As the dessert plates were cleared, Lady Eleanor rose, her voice steady but strained. "My friends, I invited you here not only for companionship, but to address a matter of concern. I have reason to believe someone wishes to disrupt the peace of Blackthorn Manor. Monsieur Poirot is here to ensure that does not happen." A murmur rippled through the guests. Colonel Hargrave sputtered, "Preposterous! Who would dare threaten you, Eleanor?" Beatrice's fan snapped shut. and Vance's pen paused. Clara's eyes met Poirot's for a fleeting moment, then dropped. Before Lady Eleanor could respond, a scream shattered the air, high and piercing, from the direction of the servants' quarters. The guests froze, their faces pale in the candlelight. Grayson appeared at the door, his composure frayed. "My lady, it's Molly, the housemaid. She's found something disturbing." Poirot was on his feet in an instant, Hastings close behind. They followed Grayson through a maze of corridors to a small pantry, where a young maid stood trembling, her apron twisted in her hands. On the floor lay a velvet pouch, its contents spilled, a single blackthorn berry, crushed, and a scrap of paper bearing the words, "The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow." Poirot knelt, his lens already in hand. The paper was cheap, the ink fresh, but the handwriting was unfamiliar, its loops exaggerated as if to disguise the author's style. The berry, however, intrigued him most. Its juice stained the paper, suggesting it had been deliberately crushed. "Mon dear Poirot," murmured, "this is no accident. Someone wishes us to find this message." Hastings frowned. "But what does it mean, Poirot? A tool? A weapon, perhaps?" Poirot rose, his eyes gleaming. "Perhaps, Hastings. Or perhaps it is something more intangible, a clue to the mind of our adversary." Lady Eleanor clutched her shawl, her face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot, what does this portend?" Poirot's mustache curved in a faint smile. "It portends, madame, that the game has begun, and Hercule Poirot does not lose at games of the mind." The guests were ushered back to the drawing room, their voices a nervous hum. Poirot lingered in the pantry, his lens sweeping the floor. He found a single thread of silk, crimson and fine, caught in the doorframe. It was not from Molly's apron or any guest's attire he had observed. Tucking it into his pocket, he rejoined the others, his mind already spinning a web of possibilities. As the clock struck 10, Lady Eleanor retired, citing fatigue, and the guests dispersed to their rooms. Poirot and Hastings were shown to adjacent chambers on the second floor, each furnished with heavy oak furniture and damask curtains. Hastings yawned, but Poirot was alert, his fingers tracing the lens case. "Hastings," he said softly, "this manor is a stage, and we are in the first act of a drama most intricate. The secret tool is not merely an object, it is a challenge. We must watch, listen, and above all, think." Hastings nodded, though his eyes were heavy. "Right, Poirot, but that note, it's dashed unsettling. Who could have left it?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the moon cast shadows like thorns across the floor. "Someone who knows the power of words, mon ami. Someone who wishes to unsettle us all." As Hastings retired, Poirot sat at the desk in his room, the note before him. He examined it again with his lens, noting the faint watermark of a local stationer. The message was a riddle, but its placement in the pantry suggested a servant's involvement or someone posing as one. He thought of the crimson thread, the lavender scent of Clara's perfume, the Colonel's nervous glances, and Vance's too perfect charm. A soft creak interrupted his thoughts. He froze, his hand on the lens. The sound came from the corridor, a deliberate step on the floorboards. Rising silently, he opened his door a fraction and peered out. The hallway was dark, save for a flicker of candlelight at the far end, near Lady Eleanor's study. Poirot slipped into the corridor, his patent leather shoes silent on the rug. The candlelight vanished around a corner, and he followed, his senses sharp. He reached the study door, which was ajar, and glimpsed a figure inside a shadow, moving swiftly, then gone. He entered his lens at the ready, and found the room undisturbed, save for a single drawer in the desk slightly askew. He opened it, revealing a bundle of letters, tied with a ribbon. They were the threatening letters Lady Eleanor had mentioned, each written in the same exaggerated script as the note in the pantry. But one letter was different, its paper finer, its ink faded. It read, "The past is never buried, Eleanor. The tool will find you." Poirot's heart quickened. This was no idle threat, it was personal, rooted in a history Lady Eleanor had not disclosed. He replaced the letters, ensuring the drawer looked untouched, and returned to his room. his mind a whirlwind of theories. As he settled into bed, the note's words echoed. The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow. Poirot closed his eyes, his little gray cells alight. The chapter of this mystery had closed with a question, but it was a satisfying one, for it promised a puzzle worthy of his genius. Tomorrow, he would observe, question, and unravel the threads of Blackthorn Manor's secrets, one clue at a time. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Jewel. The morning after the gala at Blackthorn Manor broke with a deceptive calm. Sunlight streamed through the tall, mullioned windows of the dining hall, casting golden pools on the polished oak table where the guests gathered for breakfast. The air was thick with the scent of freshly baked scones, strong coffee, and an undercurrent of unease that lingered from the previous night's unsettling events. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, with a crisp white shirt, sat at the far end of the table. His mustache meticulously groomed, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The cryptic note from the night before, "The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow," rested in his breast pocket, its words a silent challenge to his little gray cells. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, the hostess, presided over the table with a strange smile. Her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald green dress contrasted sharply with the pallor of her face, betraying her anxiety despite her efforts to maintain composure. Around her sat the eclectic assembly of guests. Colonel Reginald Hawthorne, a retired military man with a ruddy complexion and a penchant for bluster. Miss Sylvia Langley, the young heiress whose sapphire blue eyes sparkled with restless energy. Mr. Lionel Drake, the playwright whose sharp wit masked a brooding intensity. And Miss Clara Wren, the governess, whose reserved demeanor and guarded glances suggested secrets she was unwilling to share. The clink of porcelain and the murmur of polite conversation were interrupted by a piercing cry from upstairs. Lady Eleanor's teacup clattered to its saucer, and all heads turned toward the sound. Moments later, her lady's maid, Agnes, burst into the room, her face ashen. "My lady," Agnes gasped, clutching the doorframe. "The sapphire necklace, it's gone." The room erupted into chaos. Colonel Hawthorne slammed his fist on the table, rattling the silverware. "Thieves in the house," he bellowed. Sylvia Langley gasped, her hand flying to her throat as if to check her own jewelry. Lionel Drake leaned back in his chair, one eyebrow arched in cynical amusement, while Clara Wren's eyes darted to the floor, her fingers tightening around her napkin. Poirot rose smoothly, his calm authority cutting through the clamor. "Madame," he addressed Lady Eleanor, "if you would permit, I shall investigate this matter at once. A theft in such a house demands the utmost discretion and precision." Lady Eleanor nodded, her lips trembling. "Please, Monsieur, that necklace is not merely a jewellet, it's a family heirloom, passed down for generations. Its loss is catastrophic." Poirot inclined his head. "Then we shall proceed. If you would all remain here, I shall return shortly with my observations." He followed Agnes upstairs to Lady Eleanor's bedroom, a grand chamber adorned with heavy velvet drapes and an ornate four-poster bed. The safe, a sturdy iron contraption embedded in the wall behind a portrait of a stern-faced ancestor, stood open, its contents conspicuously absent. The sapphire necklace, renowned for its deep blue stones set in an intricate silver filigree, was nowhere to be seen. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. The window was latched from the inside, the door showed no signs of forced entry, and the key remained in Lady Eleanor's possession. "A most curious theft," he murmured, his fingers brushing the edge of his mustache. From his pocket, he produced his secret Tula pocket magnifying lens, custom crafted with a precision that allowed him to discern details invisible to the untrained eye. He knelt by the safe, his movements deliberate, and examined the lock. "A smudged fingerprint," he noted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it is incomplete, a mere suggestion of a ridge. Most interesting." He tilted the lens, catching the light, and his gaze fell on a tiny anomaly, a single thread of silk, shimmering faintly blue, caught in the hinge of the safe. "And this," he said, carefully extracting the thread with a pair of tweezers. is not a fabric one finds in the wardrobe of a casual thief. He turned to Agnes, who hovered nervously by the door. Mademoiselle, who has access to this room? Only her ladyship, myself, and the butler. Mr. Grayson, Agnes replied, her voice quivering. The key is kept in her ladyship's jewelry box, and I swear it was there last night when I locked the room. And yet, Poirot mused, the key is still in her possession, and the room was locked. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual last night after the gala? Agnes hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Well, there was a moment, sir, when I thought I heard footsteps in the corridor, near midnight. But when I looked, no one was there. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. Mercy, mademoiselle. You may return to your duties. I shall speak with the others. Back in the dining hall, Poirot faced a room full of expectant faces, each guest radiating a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He held up the silk thread, its delicate sheen catching the light. This, he announced, was found in the safe's hinge. It suggests the presence of someone who does not belong among us, an outsider, perhaps, or someone with access to fine materials not commonly seen in this house. Colonel Hawthorne scoffed, his mustache bristling. Nonsense. It's that governess, Clara Wren. She's been skulking about, always looking guilty. I'd wager she's got sticky fingers. Clara's head snapped up, her cheeks flushing. That's absurd. I've never been near Lady Eleanor's room. I was in my own quarters, all night, indeed. Sylvia Langley interjected, her voice sharp with accusation. Then why did I see you lingering near the staircase after dinner, looking as if you were hiding something? Clara's eyes widened, but she held her ground. I was merely fetching a book from the library. I had no reason to be anywhere else. Lionel Drake chuckled, swirling his coffee. Oh, come now. Let's not pretend we're all saints. Jealousy runs rampant in a place like this. Perhaps our dear playwright, he gestured to himself, is the culprit, driven mad by the sight of such wealth, while I scribble for pennies. Poirot's gaze lingered on Drake, noting the glint of defiance in his eyes. Monsieur Drake, your wit is entertaining, but it does not answer the question. Where were you last night after the gala? Drake shrugged. In my room, revising a script. Alone, I'm afraid, so no one to vouch for me. But I assure you, stealing jewels isn't my style. Too predictable for a man of my imagination. Poirot turned to Sylvia. And you, mademoiselle, your whereabouts? Sylvia tossed her auburn hair, her sapphire earrings glinting. I was in the conservatory, admiring the roses. The moonlight was divine, and I needed air after all that wine at dinner. Poirot's lips twitched into a faint smile. The conservatory, you say? A charming choice. And you, Colonel? Hawthorne straightened, his chest puffing out. I was in the billiard room, smoking a cigar and discussing military history with that bore of a butler, Grayson. He can confirm it. Alas, Poirot said softly, Monsieur Grayson is currently occupied with his duties, but I shall speak with him. For now, I ask that no one leaves the manor. The thief, I suspect, is still among us. The morning wore on, and Poirot conducted his interviews with a precision that bordered on surgical. Each guest's story held a kernel of truth, but their evasive glances and half-answers suggested layers of deception. The Colonel's bluster seemed to mask a deeper unease, as if he feared more than just the theft. Sylvia's flirtatious demeanor faltered when pressed about her time in the conservatory, her fingers twisting a silk handkerchief that bore a striking resemblance to the thread Poirot had found. Drake's cynicism felt rehearsed, a shield against scrutiny, while Clara's quiet reserve hinted at a past she was desperate to conceal. Poirot retreated to the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound volumes and dominated by a massive fireplace. He sat in a high-backed chair, his magnifying lens in hand, turning the silk thread over in the light. The fabric was exquisite, likely imported, suggesting wealth or access to exclusive markets. It did not match any garment he had observed among the guests, yet its presence in the safe was undeniable. A distraction, he murmured to himself. The necklace is but a pawn in a larger game. But what is the true prize? His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Captain Hastings, his loyal friend and confidant, who had been delayed by a late train and had only just arrived at the manor. Hastings, with his earnest demeanor and perpetually rumpled suit, looked around the library with wide eyes. "Good heavens, Poirot, what's all this about a stolen necklace? Sounds like a proper mess." "Indeed, mon ami Poirot," replied, his eyes gleaming. "But it is more than a theft. The note from last night, 'The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow,' suggests a deeper conspiracy. This necklace, I suspect, is a diversion meant to draw attention from a darker crime." Hastings frowned, scratching his head. "Darker crime? You mean there's more to this than a jewel thief?" Poirot nodded, holding up the silk thread. "This thread, Hastings, is a clue to an outsider's involvement. Yet the safe was locked, the room undisturbed. It is a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall unravel it." Their conversation was cut short by a commotion in the hall. Poirot and Hastings hurried out to find Lady Eleanor in a state of near collapse, supported by Agnes. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I've just received this." She held out a folded piece of paper, its edges crumpled as if clutched in fear. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes narrowing as he read the scrawled words. "The jewel is but the beginning. Look to the shadows, or more will be lost." The handwriting was jagged, deliberately disguised, but Poirot's lens revealed a faint watermark on the paper crest he recognized as belonging to a rare stationery used by the Blackthorn family. "This," Poirot said, his voice low, "confirms my suspicion. The theft is a prelude, a spark to ignite a greater fire. We must act swiftly, Hastings, for the shadow looms closer than we know." The day unfolded with a series of calculated moves. Poirot interviewed the butler, Grayson, a gaunt man with a perpetually sour expression. Grayson confirmed the colonel's alibi, but admitted to hearing a strange noise near Lady Eleanor's room. Around midnight, a soft thud, like a muffled step. Poirot examined the corridor outside the bedroom, his lens revealing a faint scuff mark on the floor, barely visible to the naked eye. It was the mark of a shoe, narrow and elegant, unlike the heavy boots of the staff or the guest's attire. Next, Poirot visited the conservatory, where Sylvia claimed to have spent her evening. The roses were indeed in bloom, their scent heavy in the air, but the ground was dry, untouched by recent rain. Yet Sylvia's shoes, which Poirot discreetly examined, bore traces of damp earth, suggesting she had been elsewhere, perhaps near the manor's outer walls, where the soil was still moist from a morning dew. Drake, meanwhile, proved elusive. Poirot found him in the billiard room, idly chalking a cue, his eyes darting to the door, as if expecting an interruption. "Monsieur Drake," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you spoke of revising a script last night. Might I see this work of yours?" Drake hesitated, then produced a few crumpled pages from his pocket. The script was a chaotic mess of crossed-out lines and cryptic notes, but Poirot's lens caught a phrase scrawled in the margin, "The shadow knows." It was written in the same jagged hand as the threatening note, though Drake dismissed it as a mere plot idea for his next play. Clara Wren was the last to be questioned. She sat in the drawing room, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gray dress blending into the shadows. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, "you claim to have been in the library last night, yet Miss Langley saw you near the staircase. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Clara's eyes flickered with something akin to fear. I may have passed the staircase on my way to the library. I was distracted, thinking of my duties. I meant no harm." Poirot leaned forward, his lens glinting in the lamplight. "And this book you sought, what was its title?" Clara faltered. "It was a volume of poetry. Tennyson, I believe." Poirot's smile was thin, a curious choice for a governess so burdened by duties. "I shall verify this with the library's catalogue." As the day drew to a close, Poirot stood alone in the garden, the setting sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. The silk thread, the scuff mark, the watermark, the cryptic notes all pointed to a web of deception that extended beyond the theft of a necklace. The manor's opulence hid a darker truth, one that Poirot's secret tool, his lens, yes, but also his relentless pursuit of order in chaos, would soon uncover. He returned to the dining hall, where the guests awaited, their faces a gallery of suspicion and fear. "Mies, Amos," Poirot announced, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. "The theft of the sapphire necklace is but the first act in a drama of deceit. The thread I found suggests an outsider, yet the locked room and the guarded alibis point to someone within these walls. I urge you to remain vigilant, for the true crime has yet to reveal itself." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests like a fog. Sylvia clutched her handkerchief, Drake's smirk faltered, Clara's gaze dropped to the floor, and the colonel's hand trembled on his glass. Lady Eleanor, her eyes wide with dread, whispered, "What do you mean, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I mean, madame, that the necklace is but a distraction. The true prize lies elsewhere, hidden where truth meets shadow. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it." As the guests dispersed, their whispers trailing into the night, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase. The puzzle was far from solved, but the pieces were beginning to align. Somewhere in Blackthorn Manor, the shadow waited, and Poirot's little gray cells were ready to meet it. Chapter 3. The locked room. The clock in Blackthorn Manor's grand hall struck midnight, its chimes rolling through the darkened corridors like a mournful knell. Hercule Poirot, seated in his guest room, was adjusting the wick of an oil lamp when a sharp crack shattered the silence. A gunshot, unmistakable and chilling. He paused, his fingers still on the lamp's brass knob, his keen mind already racing. The sound had come from the east wing, where the manor's study lay. Without hesitation, he slipped his customized pocket magnifying lens into his waistcoat, donned his dressing gown, and stepped into the shadowed hallway. The manor was a labyrinth of creaking oak and flickering candlelight, its walls adorned with stern portraits of Blackthorn ancestors. As Poirot moved swiftly but silently, his polished shoes barely whispering against the polished floor, he noted the faint hum of panic rising from below. Voices overlapped: Lady Eleanor's sharp cry, the colonel's barked orders, the tremulous gasps. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax, but something else lingered, faint yet distinct, a trace of lavender, delicate and out of place in the grim moment. He reached the study door, a heavy slab of mahogany carved with ivy motifs, and found it locked. Captain Hastings, ever loyal but perpetually a step behind, arrived panting at his side, his face flushed. "Poirot, did you hear it? A shot, wasn't it? Good heavens, what's happened?" "Calm yourself, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice steady as he tested the door's handle. It didn't budge. "We must proceed with precision. The door, it is locked, but the truth, it is never so secure." The gathered guests formed a tense semicircle behind him. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, her silver hair loosened from its elegant chignon, her eyes wide with dread. Colonel Reginald Vance, his military bearing strained, his mustache twitching as he clutched a candelabra. Sylvia Marlowe, the young heiress, clutching a silk shawl, her pale face a mask of shock. Edmund Crane, the playwright, his sharp features taut as he muttered about tragic inevitability. And Miss Clara Wren, the governess, her dark eyes darting, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles gleamed white. The staff hovered at the edges, maids wringing their aprons, footmen exchanging nervous glances. "Break it down," Colonel Vance bellowed, stepping forward as if to shoulder the door himself. "No time for dilly-dallying, man." Poirot raised a hand, his small frame commanding instant attention. "Nan, Colonel, to break is to destroy evidence. We shall find another way." He knelt, ignoring the murmurs, and drew out his magnifying lens. The lock was old but sturdy, its keyhole unmarred by scratches or signs of tampering. He tilted his head, listening. No sound came from within, no groans, no movement, only silence, heavy and ominous. Lady Eleanor's voice trembled. "It's the study, Poirot. Only the butler, Mr. Harrow, has the key tonight." He said he needed to review accounts. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And where is this Mr. Harrow now, madame? She faltered, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief. I don't know. He was at dinner, serving us. But then, fetch the spare key. Poirot instructed a footman, who scurried off. As they waited, Poirot turned to the guests, his gaze piercing. Who was last to see Mr. Harrow? Miss Clara spoke, her voice low but steady. I saw him in the corridor after dinner, perhaps 10 o'clock. He seemed distracted. He carried a tray with a decanter of brandy. Brandy, you say? Poirot's mustache twitched. And where was he headed? Toward the study, she replied, her eyes meeting his briefly before dropping. The footman returned with the spare key, and Poirot unlocked the door with a soft click. He pushed it open, revealing a scene frozen in time. The study was a sanctuary of leather-bound books and dark wood, lit by a single oil lamp on a massive desk. Mr. Harrow, the butler, sat slumped in a high-backed chair, his head tilted back, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A pistol lay loosely in his right hand, its barrel glinting dully. A piece of paper, scrawled with uneven handwriting, rested on the desk beside a spilled inkpot. Blood pooled beneath the chair, stark against the polished floor. Sylvia gasped, turning away, while Crane muttered, "Good Lord, it's like a scene from one of my plays." Colonel Vance pushed forward, his voice gruff. "Suicide, plain as day. Poor chap must have had debts or some such trouble." Poirot's lips pursed. "Plain, Colonel. Nothing is plain until Hercule Poirot has examined it." He stepped into the room, motioning for Hastings to keep the others back. No one enters. The scene, it must remain untouched. He knelt beside the body, his lens already in hand. Mr. Harrow's face was pale, the entry wound at his temple clean but brutal. The pistol, a Webley revolver, was standard but well maintained, its grip worn from use. Poirot's lens hovered over the hand holding it, noting the finger's lax grip. The absence of powder burns on the skin. He frowned, then turned to the note. It read, "I cannot go on. Forgive me." The handwriting was jagged, the ink smudged as if written in haste. "Suicide, you say?" Poirot murmured, his lens tracing the paper's edges. The writing was uneven, but something else caught his eye, a faint indentation, as if another sheet had been pressed beneath it. He lifted the note carefully, holding it to the light. The lens revealed subtle inconsistencies. The pen's pressure varied, and certain letters, particularly the loops of the G and F, seemed forced. Unlike the butler's precise script Poirot had glimpsed on household ledgers earlier. He stood, his gaze sweeping the room. The windows were latched, the curtains undisturbed. A single glass of brandy sat on a side table, half empty, its amber liquid catching the lamplight. Poirot leaned closer, inhaling. The lavender scent was stronger here, clinging to the air like a ghost. He traced it to the glass, where his lens revealed a faint smudge on the rim, a trace of lip rouge, barely visible, but unmistakable. "Curio," he muttered, turning to the guests clustered at the door. "Miss Wren, you wear a lavender perfume, do you not?" The governess stiffened, her dark eyes narrowing. "I do, but I haven't been in here tonight." "And yet," Poirot said, his tone mild but probing, "the scent, it lingers near the body. How do you explain this?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. Colonel Vance snorted. "Nonsense, Poirot. Lavender's common enough. My late wife used it. Probably just a maid's cleaning polish." "Perhaps," Poirot said, but his eyes gleamed with skepticism. He moved to the desk, examining the inkpot. A single drop had spilled, trailing toward the edge, as if the writer had been interrupted. He scanned the floor, his lens catching a glint beneath the desk, a tiny pearl button, its thread frayed. He pocketed it discreetly, his mind already weaving connections. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, "this looks straightforward. The man shot himself. The note, the locked door, straightforward." Poirot's voice was sharp. "Mon ami, a locked door is but a challenge to the truth. And this note is not what it seems. Observe the handwriting, the pressure. It is as if the hand that wrote it trembled not from despair, but from coercion." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Sylvia clutched her shawl tighter. But who would want to hurt Mr. Harrow? He was just the butler. Poirot's eyes flicked to her. No one is just anything, mademoiselle. Every man has secrets, and secrets, they breed enemies. He turned back to the room, his lens sweeping the walls. The study was a fortress of order books, neatly shelved, papers stacked precisely, except for one anomaly. A small painting, a pastoral scene of Devonshire hills, hung slightly askew. Poirot approached it, his fingers brushing the frame. It shifted, revealing a faint outline in the wallpaper, as if something had been pressed against it repeatedly. He made a mental note but said nothing. Lady Eleanor, her voice barely above a whisper, broke the silence. "Mr. Poirot, what do we do now? If this wasn't suicide, then we have a murderer among us," Poirot said, his tone calm but carrying a weight that silenced the room. "And I, Hercule Poirot, shall find them. Tomorrow, we shall reconstruct the events of this night. Each of you will account for your movements. For now, this room remains sealed. No one enters, no one leaves the manor." The colonel bristled. "Preposterous. You can't confine us like prisoners." Poirot's smile was thin but unyielding. "I do not confine, Colonel. I protect the truth. It is a delicate thing, and I shall not let it slip away." As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the tense silence, Poirot lingered, his lens catching one final detail, a faint scratch on the floor near the desk, as if something heavy had been dragged. He knelt, tracing it with a finger. It led to the rug, which, when lifted, revealed nothing but polished wood, yet the scratch suggested movement, purpose. Someone had been here, someone who knew the manor's secrets. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like a warning. Poirot straightened, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The lavender scent, the forged note, the pearl button, the askew painting, each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and at its center was the secret tool mentioned in the cryptic note slipped under his door. The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow. Was it his lens, his method, or something more tangible, hidden in the manor's depths? He returned to his room, the lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Hastings followed, his face a mixture of awe and unease. "Poirot, do you really think it's murder? It's so tidy." "Tidy, mon ami." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The tidier the crime, the more dangerous the criminal. They wish to deceive Hercule Poirot, but they forget my little gray cells. They see through the shadows." He sat at the small desk in his room, pulling out a notebook. With meticulous care, he began to list the night's observations. The gunshot at midnight, the locked door, the forged note, the lavender scent, the pearl button, the askew painting, the scratch on the floor. Each was a puzzle piece, and Poirot knew that somewhere, in their arrangement, lay the truth. The next morning, the manor buzzed with unease. Breakfast was a somber affair, the clink of silverware sharp against the silence. Poirot observed guests, noting their strained expressions. Sylvia toyed with her toast, her eyes darting to the governess, who sat rigidly, her coffee untouched. Crane scribbled in a notebook, his pen moving furiously, while the colonel glowered at his eggs as if they'd insulted him. Lady Eleanor, pale but composed, announced that the gala would continue as planned. "We must not let this tragedy overshadow our purpose," she said, though her voice wavered. Poirot sipped his tea, his mind elsewhere. The lavender scent gnawed at him. Miss Clara admitted to wearing it, but the colonel's dismissal that it was common rang hollow. He recalled the lip rouge on the brandy glass. None of the women admitted to wearing it, yet the smudge was fresh, deliberate, and the pearl buttonet matched none of the guests' clothing he'd seen thus far, suggesting an outsider or a carefully hidden garment. After breakfast, he requested a private word with Miss Clara. They met in the library, a cavernous room lined with books and heavy with the scent of aged paper. She stood by a window, her dark hair catching the morning light, her expression guarded. "Miss Wren," Poirot began, his tone gentle but firm. "You were near the study last night. Weep the lavender. It follows you." Her eyes flashed, but she composed herself. "I told you, I saw Mr. Harrow in the corridor. I didn't enter the study." "And yet," Poirot said, producing the pearl button from his pocket, "this was found near the body. It is not yours." She paled, her fingers brushing her sleeve as if checking for missing buttons. "No, I don't wear pearls. They're ostentatious." Poirot nodded, pocketing the button. "And the brandy glass. Did you share a drink with Mr. Harrow?" Her lips tightened. "I don't drink brandy." "You're mistaken, Monsieur Poirot." "Perhaps," he said, but his eyes held hers until she looked away. He let her go, knowing she was hiding something, but the truth required patience. Next, he sought out Colonel Vance, finding him in the billiard room, idly rolling a cue ball across the green felt. The colonel's bluster had faded, replaced by a weary defensiveness. "Colonel," Poirot said, "you are quick to call this a suicide." "Why?" Vance snorted, setting the cue ball spinning. "Man's got a gun in his hand, a note on the desk, locked room. What else could it be?" "Don't complicate things, Poirot." "Complication," Poirot said, "is the path to truth. Tell me, did you know Mr. Harrow well?" "Hardly. Decent chap, kept to himself. Butlers do, don't they?" "And yet," Poirot pressed, "you seem eager to close this matter. Perhaps you know more than you say." Vance's mustache bristled. "See here, I won't be accused by some foreign detective. Accuse Nan. I merely observed." Poirot's lens glinted as he leaned closer, examining the colonel's cufflinks. No pearls, but a faint trace of ash clung to his sleeve, ash with a hint of lavender. "You were in the study, perhaps." "Rubbish," Vance snapped, but his eyes flickered with unease. Poirot left him, his mind cataloging the encounter. The colonel's defensiveness, Clara's evasiveness, the heiress's nervous glances. Each guest was a knot in the mystery, and the secret tool was the key to unraveling them. By afternoon, Poirot had examined the study again, this time with Hastings at his side. The scratch on the floor still puzzled him. He followed it to the wall, where the askew painting hung. Removing it, he tapped the panel behind it, hearing a hollow echo. A hidden compartment. He pressed gently, but nothing gave. Still, the discovery confirmed his suspicion. The study was not as secure as it seemed. He turned to the brandy glass, re-examining the lip rouge. The shade was subtle, a soft coral, not the bold red Sylvia favored, or the nude tones Lady Eleanor wore. Miss Clara claimed to use none, and the maids, when questioned, denied wearing makeup on duty. Another thread, leading nowhere, yet, as evening fell, Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, his demeanor calm but commanding. "Miss Amos," he began, "the death of Mr. Harrow is no suicide. The note, it is forged. The room, it is not so locked as it appears. And the lavender tells a story of its own. Tomorrow, we shall reconstruct the night. Each of you will tell me where you were, what you saw, what you heard. The truth, it hides, but not from Hercule Poirot." The room was silent, the guests' faces a gallery of fear, guilt, and suspicion. Sylvia clutched Crane's arm. The colonel glared at the floor, and Miss Clara's eyes met Poirot's, steady but unreadable. Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you to find the truth, but please, hurry. I fear we are not safe." Poirot bowed slightly. "Fear not, madame. The little gray cells, they are already at work." As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, his lens in hand, his mind a whirl of questions. The secret tool was more than his lens, more than a physical object. It was a method, a way of seeing through the shadows of deception. And in Blackthorn Manor, those shadows were deep indeed. Chapter 4. The alibi unravels. The morning sun cast long, golden fingers through the tall windows of Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. The grandeur of the room, with its polished mahogany paneling and velvet drapes, seemed at odds with the tension that hung over the assembled guests. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, precise frame a stark contrast to the opulent Serenity. His mustache twitched as he surveyed the room, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. The way the retired Colonel Reginald Ashby gripped his cane, the heiress Sophia Langley's nervous fidgeting with her pearl bracelet, the playwright Julian Warwick's forced nonchalance as he leaned against the fireplace, and the governess Miss Clara Henshaw's rigid posture, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Lady Eleanor Blackthorne, their hostess, sat in a high-backed chair, her face pale but composed, her eyes darting between her guests as if searching for answers she dared not voice. The events of the previous night, the gunshot, the discovery of the butler, Mr. Grayson's body in the locked study, the apparent suicide note had left the household in a state of uneasy disquiet. Poirot, however, was not convinced by appearances. The faint scent of lavender near the body, the inconsistencies in the handwriting, and now the task before him, to unravel the alibis of those present and expose the threads of deceit woven into their stories. His secret tool, as the cryptic note under his door had called it, was not merely his customized magnifying lens, but his method, his unerring ability to see through the fog of lies to the crystalline truth beneath. Ms. Amos, Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. We are gathered to discuss the events of last night, the tragic death of Mr. Grayson. Each of you has provided an account of your whereabouts at the time of the gunshot, heard at midnight. Yet, I, Hercule Poirot, find certain discrepancies. We shall review these alibis, and I assure you, the truth will emerge, as it always does. The room stirred. Colonel Ashby cleared his throat, his weathered face set in a scowl. This is preposterous, Poirot. The man shot himself. The note was clear. Why drag us through this charade? Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. The note, Colonel, is not so clear as you believe, but we shall come to that. First, let us begin with Mademoiselle Langley. You claim you were in the garden at midnight. Sophia Langley, her auburn hair catching the light, nodded quickly. At 23, she was the youngest guest, her wealth inherited from a shipping magnate father, her demeanor a mix of charm and unease. Yes, Mr. Poirot, I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk in the rose garden. The air was cool, and I needed to clear my head after all the tension at dinner. Poirot tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. The rose garden, you say? A most romantic choice, mademoiselle. And you were alone? Yes, quite alone. Her voice was firm, but her fingers twisted the bracelet. Tighter, curio, Poirot murmured, stepping closer to her. He reached into his pocket and produced his magnifying lens, its silver frame gleaming as he held it up. Permit me, mademoiselle, to examine your shoes. Sophia's eyes widened. My shoes? Whatever for? A small matter of curiosity, Poirot said, his tone light but unyielding. He knelt before her, ignoring her protests, and inspected the delicate leather pumps she wore. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Poirot's lens hovered over the soles, and he let out a soft ah. He stood, brushing his hands together. Mademoiselle Langley, you say you walked in the rose garden, yet your shoes bear traces of mud, dark, clay-like mud, not the sandy soil of the garden path, which, I observed this morning, is quite dry after days without rain. This mud, it is more consistent with the earth near the stables, where the ground is damped from a leaking trough. Perhaps you were not in the garden at all. Sophia's cheeks flushed, and she stammered, I may have wandered farther than I realized. It was dark, Mr. Poirot. I could have strayed near the stables. Possible, Poirot said, his tone neutral but his eyes piercing. Yet you did not mention this wandering. We shall revisit this, mademoiselle. For now, let us turn to Monsieur Warwick. Julian Warwick, the playwright, straightened from his slouch against the fireplace. His sharp features and tousled dark hair gave him a rakish air, but his eyes were wary. I've told you, Poirot, he said, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a man used to the stage. I was in the library, working on my new play. I heard the clock strike midnight, clear as day, and then the gunshot, moments later. Poirot nodded, pacing slowly. The clock, yes. A most precise detail. You are certain it struck midnight? Absolutely, Julian said, crossing his arms. I'm not deaf, Poirot. Nan, I do not suggest you are. But let us examine this clock. Poirot moved to the grandfather clock, its ornate face gleaming in the sunlight. He opened the glass cover and peered inside, his lens glinting as he inspected the mechanism. The guests watched, some with curiosity, others with growing unease. After a moment, Poirot closed the cover and turned to the room. This clock, Mies Amos, did not strike midnight last night. It could not have, for it was stopped at precisely 11:45. The pendulum is still the gears, untouched since then. Monsieur Warwick, how do you explain hearing a clock that did not chime? Julian's confident facade faltered. I must have misheard. Perhaps it was another clock. The manor is full of them. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but laced with skepticism. Yet this is the only clock in the library, and the others are too distant to be heard so clearly. Your alibi, monsieur, is, how do you say, wobbly. The room erupted in murmurs. Colonel Ashby slammed his cane against the floor. This is absurd. You're accusing us all of lying, Poirot. I was in my room, reading, when I heard the shot. Clara was with me. We were discussing her duties with my grandson. Isn't that right, Miss Henshaw? Miss Clara Henshaw, the governess, nodded stiffly. Her plain gray dress and tightly pinned hair gave her an air of severity, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Yes, Colonel. We were in your sitting room until just before midnight. Then I retired to my quarters. Poirot turned to her, his expression unreadable. And you heard nothing unusual, Mademoiselle Henshaw? No footsteps, no voices, before the gunshot? Nothing, she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. I went straight to bed. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, then shifted to Lady Eleanor, who had remained silent, her fingers tracing the armrest of her chair. Madame Blackthorne, you were in your bedroom. You heard the shot and summoned me immediately after. Yes, Mr. Poirot, Lady Eleanor said, her voice low but firm. I was preparing for bed when I heard the noise. I sent my maid to fetch you at once. Poirot nodded, his fingers stroking his mustache. Bon. So we have Mademoiselle Langley, perhaps not in the garden but near the stables. Monsieur Warwick, hearing a clock that did not chime. Colonel Ashby and Mademoiselle Henshaw together until just before midnight. And Madame Blackthorne, in her room. Yet the study was locked, the key inside with poor Mr. Grayson, a puzzle. Nan. The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Sophia twisted her bracelet so fiercely it snapped, a pearl skittering across the floor. Julian swore under his breath, and Clara's hands clenched tighter. Colonel Ashby's scowl deepened, but he said nothing. Poirot paced, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood. Let us consider the study itself. A locked room, a dead man, a note. But I, Hercule Poirot, do not believe in the impossible. This morning, I examined the study again, and I found something most intriguing. He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch. Then, from his pocket, he produced a small brass key, its surface worn, but distinct. This key, Mies Amos, was found not in the study, but in a crevice behind a bookcase in the hallway outside. It is not the key to the study door, but to something else, a hidden mechanism, perhaps. Lady Eleanor gasped. A hidden mechanism. In my home, precisement, Poirot said. I explored further and discovered a panel behind the study's bookcase, cunningly concealed. It opens to a narrow passage, one that leads to the servants' quarters, and, curiously, to an exit near the stables. The room erupted in chaos. Sophia cried out, "The stables! I told you, I wandered there by mistake." Julian shouted, "This is nonsense, a secret passage." Colonel Ashby banged his cane again, bellowing, "Preposterous! You're inventing fairy tales, Poirot." Only Clara remained silent, her face pale as porcelain. Poirot's eyes flicked to her, noting her stillness. "Mademoiselle Henge, you have nothing to say about this passage, which passes close to your room." I knew nothing of it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Poirot smiled faintly. We shall see. But for now, let us consider what this passage means. The study was not so locked as it seemed. Someone could have entered, killed Mr. Grayson, and left, locking the door from within using a duplicate key or another trick. Note, with its inconsistencies, suggests it was not written by a man about to die but by someone wishing to deceive. Colonel Ashby stood, his face red with indignation. Enough of this. You're accusing us all without proof. I demand you stop this witch hunt. Nan, Colonel, Poirot said sharply. I accuse no one yet, but I will find the truth. The alibis, they crumble like dry leaves. The mud on Mademoiselle Langley's shoes, the silent clock of Monsieur Warwick, the convenient meeting of you and Mademoiselle Henshaw, and this hidden passage all point to a truth that is not what it seems. Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling. Mr. Poirot, what does this mean? Is my home a den of murderers? Poirot turned to her, his expression softening. Madame, it means that someone in this house has woven a web of lies, and I, Hercule Poirot, will untangle it. The secret tool mentioned in the note under my doorway is not merely my lens, but my method, my little gray cells, and they are already at work. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests like a fog. Sophia's eyes darted to Julian, who avoided her gaze. Clara stared at her hands, and Colonel Ashby gripped his cane as if it were a lifeline. Lady Eleanor sank back into her chair, her face a mask of dread. Poirot clapped his hands, breaking the tension. Bon, for now, we adjourn, but I advise you all to reflect on your stories. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself, and I shall be there when it does. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, his lens in hand, his mind racing. The passage was a breakthrough, but it raised more questions. Who knew of it? Who had used it? And why the scent of lavender near Grayson's body? He glanced at the grandfather clock, its hands still frozen at 11:45, and a thought struck him. The clock had been stopped deliberately, not by accident. Someone had needed time to act, time to deceive. He made his way to the study, Captain Hastings trailing behind. His loyal friends face a mixture of admiration and confusion. Poirot, Hastings said, this passage, business, it's extraordinary. Do you really think someone used it to kill Grayson? Poirot paused at the study door, his lens catching the light. Hastings, mon ami, the passage is but one piece of the puzzle. The alibis, the lies, the lavender, they all point to a plan, a design. Someone in this house is playing a dangerous game, and I must understand their motive. Inside the study, Poirot examined the bookcase, running his fingers along the hidden panel. It opened with a soft click, revealing a narrow, musty corridor. He stepped inside, his lens illuminating the darkness. The passage was old, its walls damp, but there were signs of recent use, scuff marks on the floor. A faint trace of lavender lingering in the air. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. This passage is the key, but not the whole answer. Someone used it to move unseen, to create the illusion of a locked room. But why? To hide a murder, but also to hide something else, something they fear I will discover. Hastings frowned. The necklace, perhaps, the theft, and the murder must be connected. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Or perhaps the necklace is a distraction, a sleight of hand to divert us from a deeper truth. Come, we must examine the other end of this passage. They followed the corridor, emerging near the servants' quarters, close to Clara's room. Poirot knelt, his lens revealing a single thread of gray wool, caught on a splintered floorboard. He plucked it carefully, holding it to the light. This, Hastings, is from a garment perhaps, a shawl or a coat, and it is not unlike the fabric of Mademoiselle Henshaw's attire. You think Clara's involved? Hastings asked, his eyes wide. I think, mon ami, that everyone is involved until proven otherwise. But Mademoiselle Henshaw, she is hiding something. The lavender, the passage, the thread, they circle her like shadows. As they returned to the main house, Poirot's mind churned. The alibis had unraveled, but the truth was still elusive. Sophia's muddy shoes suggested she had been somewhere she shouldn't. Julian's clock story was a fabrication. Clara and the Colonel's shared alibi was too convenient, and the passage it changed everything, making the locked room a lie. That evening, as the guests gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was electric with suspicion. Sophia avoided Julian's gaze, her bracelet repaired but her demeanor brittle. Julian drank heavily, his wit replaced by a sullen silence. Clara ate sparingly, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Colonel Ashby muttered about the indignity of being questioned. Lady Eleanor, ever the gracious hostess, tried to steer the conversation to lighter topics, but her voice trembled. Poirot watched them all, his lens tucked away but his mind as sharp as ever. The secret tool was not just his lens, nor even his method. It was his ability to see the human heart, to understand the motives that drove each guest to lie, to conceal, to betray. The passage had opened a physical door, but the real challenge was unlocking the secrets within Blackthorn Manor's walls. That as the meal ended, Poirot rose, his presence commanding silence. Mies, Amos, tonight I have learned much, but there is more to uncover. I urge you to speak the truth, for the lies you tell will only tighten the noose around the guilty. Tomorrow, we shall continue, and the secret tool will reveal all. He left the dining room, the weight of his words lingering. Behind him, the guests exchanged glances, each wondering who among them was the spider at the center of this web of lies. And Poirot, climbing the stairs to his room, knew that the next day would bring him closer to the truth, closer to the shadow that hid the killer. Chapter 5. The shadow of Motive. The morning mist clung to Blackthorn Manor like a shroud, its tendrils curling around the ivy-clad walls as if guarding secrets of their own. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the grand staircase, his polished shoes gleaming faintly in the dim light filtering through the stained glass windows. His eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the hall below, where the guests milled about in a state of uneasy truce after the butler's death. The air was thick with suspicion, each glance a silent accusation, each whisper a thread in the tangled web of lies. Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, his movements precise, almost ceremonial. His mind, however, was far from calm. The locked room, the stopped clock, the scent of lavender, these were not mere clues but pieces of a larger mosaic, one that required his most delicate tool. His little gray cells, aided by the subtle power of his custom magnifying lens. The note from the first night slipped under his door, lingered in his thoughts. The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow. Was it a taunt, a clue, or something more sinister? He intended to find out. Descending the stairs, Poirot moved with the grace of a man who knew his presence commanded attention. The guests, gathered in the drawing room for morning tea, fell silent as he entered. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn sat at the head of the table, her silver hair impeccably arranged, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Beside her, the retired Colonel Reginald Hawthorne sipped his tea with military precision, his mustache twitching as he avoided Poirot's gaze. Across from him, the young heiress, Beatrice Langley, toyed with a pearl bracelet, her delicate fingers betraying a nervous energy. The playwright, Victor Marlowe, slouched in his chair, his dark eyes darting between the others as if scripting their next move. And then there was Miss Clara Wren, the governess, her posture rigid, her face a mask of quiet defiance. "Good morning, Miss," Amos Poirot said, his voice smooth as polished oak. "I trust you have slept, though perhaps not well, given the events of last night." The room stirred uncomfortably. Beatrice let out a small laugh, quickly stifled. "Sleep, after a murder? You must be joking, Monsieur Poirot." "Not at all, Mademoiselle Langley," Poirot replied, his mustache curling slightly. "The mind, it seeks rest even in chaos. But it is the heart that betrays us, Nan, the heart that whispers of guilt, of fear, of secrets." Colonel Hawthorne coughed, setting his cup down with a clink. "Enough of this nonsense, Poirot. The butler shot himself. Plain as day. No need to stir up trouble with your theatrics." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Theatrics, Colonel Nan. Hercule Poirot does not perform. He observes, he deduces, and he sees, even in the shadows, the truth that others would hide. Miss Clara's teacup rattled against its saucer, a faint sound that drew Poirot's attention. She met his gaze briefly before looking away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Poirot noted the gesture, filing it away like a card in his mental index. Lady Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the tension. Monsieur Poirot, you mentioned last night that you would reconstruct the events of Mr. Grayson's death. Have you made progress? Progress, madame, is a matter of perspective, Poirot said, pacing slowly along the table. The death of your butler, Mr. Grayson, is not what it seems. A suicide note, yes, but one with inconsistencies. A locked room, perhaps, but not so locked as we were led to believe. And a scent, a most curious scent of lavender, which lingers where it should not. The governess stiffened, her fingers tightening around her cup. Poirot pretended not to notice, turning instead to Captain Hastings, who stood near the fireplace, his expression one of quiet concern. Hastings, mon ami, you have been silent this morning. What do you make of our little puzzle? Hastings, Blinkett, caught off guard. Well, Poirot, it's a dashed queer business. The butler, the necklace, the notice, all a bit much, isn't it? But that lavender scent, it's odd, I'll give you that. Miss Wren, don't you wear a lavender perfume? The room froze. Miss Clara's eyes widened, and she set her cup down with deliberate care. I do, Captain Hastings, she said, her voice cool but edged with something sharper. But I assure you, I was nowhere near the study last night. I was in my room, reading, Poirot repeated, his tone deceptively mild. A most admirable pastime. And what, may I ask, were you reading, Mademoiselle Wren? Her hesitation was brief, but Poirot caught it. A novel, she said. Jane Eyre. I find it comforting. Poirot nodded, his smile enigmatic. A fine choice. A story of secrets and hidden truths. Man, most appropriate. Victor Marlowe snorted, leaning back in his chair. Are we to be interrogated over our reading habits now, Poirot? If so, I was scribbling notes for a new play. Hardly sinister. Notes, Poirot said, turning to him. And where are these notes? Monsieur Marlowe, may I see them? Marlowe's smirk faltered. There. Private. A work in progress. You wouldn't understand. Perhaps not, Poirot said, his voice softening like velvet over steel. But I understand this. A man who hides his work may also hide his motives. The room fell, silent again, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the guests like dust. Lady Eleanor rose, her hands clasped tightly. Monsieur Poirot, I beg you to resolve this quickly. My home is becoming a prison, and my guests are suffering. Suffering, Poirot murmured, his eyes narrowing. Yes, madame, there is suffering here, but not all of it is visible. Some lies in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. And so, I shall begin with Mademoiselle Wren. May we speak privately? Miss Clara's face paled, but she nodded, rising with a grace that belied her tension. Poirot led her to a small parlor off the drawing room, its walls lined with faded tapestries depicting pastoral scenes. Hastings followed, closing the door behind them. The parlor was dim, lit only by a single candelabrum and the gray light filtering through a narrow window. Poirot gestured for Miss Clara to sit, but she remained standing, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Mademoiselle, Poirot began, his voice low. You are a woman of intelligence. I can see this. But intelligence, it can be a burden when it conceals the truth. Tell me, why does the scent of lavender cling to the study where Mr. Grayson died? Miss Clara's eyes flickered, but she held his gaze. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was in my room. I have no reason to be in the study. No reason, Poirot said, tilting his head. And yet, I find a letter in your possession, dropped in the corridor this morning. A letter with curious markings. He produced the letter from his pocket, a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Miss Clara's breath caught, but she said nothing as Poirot unfolded it, his magnifying lens already in hand. The letter was written in a hurried scrawl, the ink smudged in places. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be a mundane note about household duties. But Poirot's lens revealed something else. Faint indentations, as if another page had been written over this one, leaving a ghostly imprint. Most interesting, Poirot said, holding the lens closer. The ink, it is ordinary. But the indentations, they suggest a code, a series of numbers and letters, perhaps a message meant for someone else. Miss Clara's composure cracked, her voice trembling slightly. It's nothing, Monsieur Poirot. A list of chores, nothing more. Chores, Poirot repeated, his tone almost playful. And yet, these chores include the numbers 379 and the word shadow. A coincidence, perhaps, that this word appears in the note left for me. I think not. Miss Clara's hands twisted together, her knuckles white. You're mistaken. I know nothing of any note. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. Mademoiselle, I do not accuse you not yet, but I ask you to consider this. A woman with your past, your scandal, as it is whispered, cannot afford to hide the truth. Tell me, what is your connection to Mr. Grayson, and why does your perfume linger where he died? The word scandal struck like a dart. Miss Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, her voice steadying. You've heard the rumors. Then, yes, I had a scandal, a foolish affair, years ago, with a man who promised me the world and left me with nothing. I came to Blackthorn Manor to start anew, to escape my past, but it follows me, doesn't it? You think I killed Mr. Grayson because of it? Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. I think, mademoiselle, that you know more than you say. The lavender, the letter, the locked room, these are threads, and I will follow them. Speak now, and perhaps I can help you. Miss Clara hesitated, then sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping. Mr. Grayson, he knew about my past. He found out somehow, perhaps through old letters. He threatened to tell Lady Eleanor, unless I paid him. I didn't have much, but I gave him what I could. Last night, I went to the study to give him another payment, but he was already dead when I arrived. I swear it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the lavender. It's my perfume, she admitted. I wear it every day. I didn't realize it would linger. Poirot studied her, his mind racing. Her story was plausible, but incomplete. The coded letter suggested a deeper involvement, perhaps with someone else in the household. He tucked the letter back into his pocket, his lens glinting in the candlelight. Thank you, mademoiselle, he said. You may go, but know this. Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed. As Miss Clara left, her footsteps echoing softly, Hastings turned to Poirot. Do you believe her, Poirot? She seemed genuine, but that letter, it's dashed odd. Yes, Poirot said, tapping his lens against his palm. But it is not the letter that troubles me most, Hastings. It is the scent. Lavender. It's distinctive, but it is not unique. Anyone could have used it to cast suspicion on her. We must look elsewhere. Their next stop was the library, where Colonel Hawthorne was reportedly reviewing his correspondence. Poirot and Hastings found him standing by the fireplace, a small fire crackling despite the morning's warmth. The colonel was feeding papers into the flames, his movements quick and deliberate. Colonel Hawthorne, Poirot said, his voice cutting through the silence. You seem most eager to destroy your correspondence. May I ask why? The colonel froze, a half-burned sheet in his hand. Old military records, he said gruffly. Nothing of importance. Just clearing out clutter. Poirot stepped closer, his lens already in hand. Clutter, you say? And yet, the scent of lavender clings to the ashes. Most curious. Nan Hawthorne's mustache twitched, but he recovered quickly. Lavender? Nonsense. You're imagining things, Poirot. Imagining, Poirot said, kneeling by the fireplace. He swept his lens over the ashes, his movements precise. The lens revealed faint traces of ink, still legible despite the charring. A letter, perhaps, addressed to Lady Eleanor. And the word debt is visible. Colonel, were you in financial trouble? Hawthorne's face reddened. How dare you? My affairs are private, Poirot. I served my country honorably. I owe no one anything. Honor, Poirot mused, rising to his feet. A fine word, but Honor does not burn papers in secret, nor does it leave the scent of lavender where it should not be. Hastings frowned. Lavender again. Poirot, this is getting stranger by the minute. Indeed, mon ami, Poirot said, his eyes never leaving Hawthorne. The lavender is a thread, but it is not the only one. Colonel, I suggest you be more forthcoming when next we speak. As they left the library, Poirot's mind churned. The lavender, the coded letter, the burned papers each, was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. He confided to Hastings as they walked the corridor, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Hastings, the secret tool mentioned in the noted is more than my lens, more than any physical object. It is a method, a way of seeing through the deception that surrounds us. The killer is clever, weaving a web of half-truths. But Hercule Poirot is cleverer still. They paused at a window overlooking the manor's gardens, where Beatrice Langley was walking alone, her parasol twirling nervously. Poirot watched her, his eyes narrowing. Mademoiselle Langley, he said softly. She, too, has secrets. Her shoes, the mud that should not be there. We must speak with her next. The garden was a labyrinth of roses and hedges, the air heavy with the scent of blooms. Beatrice turned as Poirot and Hastings approached, her smile brittle. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, to what do I owe this visit? Your shoes, mademoiselle, Poirot said without preamble. Last night, you claimed to be in the garden during the time of Mr. Grayson's death. Yet the mud on your shoes is not from the garden path, which was dried. It is from the river bank, where the soil is darker, heavier. Why were you there? Beatrice's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on the parasol. The river bank. I took a walk. That's all I needed. Air. Air, Poirot repeated, his lens now in hand. He bent to examine her shoes, the glass catching the sunlight. And yet, this mud contains traces of clay, found only near the old boathouse. A curious place for a midnight stroll. Nan, Beatrice's eyes darted away. I don't know what you mean. I was upset, confused. I wandered farther than I intended. Poirot straightened, his gaze unrelenting. Mademoiselle, the truth is a delicate thing, but it cannot be hidden forever. What were you doing at the boathouse? And why does your bracelet bear a charm engraved with the letter G? Beatrice's hand flew to her bracelet, her face paling. It's nothing. A gift from a friend. A friend named Grayson, perhaps, Poirot pressed. The butler was not merely a servant, I think. He was a man who knew secrets, who held power over others. Did he hold power over you? Beatrice's lips trembled, but she shook her head. You're wrong, Monsieur Poirot. I had nothing to do with his death. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice softening. But you will tell me the truth, mademoiselle, or I will find it myself. As they left Beatrice in the garden, Hastings let out a low whistle. Good heavens, Poirot, you're relentless. Do you think she's involved? I think, Hastings, Poirot said, that everyone in this manor is involved, in one way or another. The question is not who is guilty, but who is most guilty. They wore on, each interview adding another layer to the mystery. Poirot's lens revealed more than physical clues. It was a symbol of his method, his ability to see what others overlooked. In Victor Marlowe's room, he found a draft of a play, its pages filled with cryptic references to betrayal and hidden vaults. In Lady Eleanor's study, he uncovered a ledger showing payments to an unknown party, marked only with the initial C. And in the attic, among forgotten trunks, he found a photograph of a young man with striking resemblance to Lady Eleanor, his face half hidden in shadow. As evening fell, Poirot stood alone in the library, his lens in hand, the coded letter spread before him. The numbers 379 matched the pages of a book on the shelf, a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets. Opening it, he found a single line underlined. Truth's best ornament is nakedness. Poirot smiled, a rare, genuine smile. The shadow of motive, he murmured. It is not one person, but many. A conspiracy, perhaps, or a single mind manipulating the fears of others. The secret tool is not a thing, it is the killer's ability to turn truth against itself. He closed the book, his mind alight with possibilities. The lavender, the letter, the mud, the ashazole were threads, and he was close to weaving them together. But the final piece eluded him, hidden in the shadows of Blackthorn Manor as he left the library. He caught sight of Miss Clara watching him from the corridor, her eyes wide with furor. Was it guilt? She turned away quickly, but not before Poirot noted the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. The chapter closed with Poirot confiding to Hastings in the quiet of the Manor's west wing. The secret tool, Hastings, is not merely my lens, nor even my little gray cells. It is the killer's own weapon, the art of deception, turned against him by Hercule Poirot. Tomorrow, we shall see who casts the longest shadow. Chapter 6. The Midnight Masquerade. The air at Blackthorn Manor buzzed with a peculiar energy as the evening of the masquerade ball approached. Lady Eleanor, ever the poised hostess, had announced the event that morning with a strained smile, her voice carrying a note of forced cheer. "We must not let these troubles dim our spirits," she had declared. Her emerald eyes sweeping over the breakfast table where the guests sat, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Hercule Poirot, seated at the far end, sipped his tisane and observed the room, his mustache twitching ever so slightly as he catalogued each flicker of unease. The troubles, of course, were no small matter. A sapphire necklace stolen from a locked room, a butler dead in a supposed suicide, and a web of alibis that unraveled like cheap thread under Poirot's scrutiny. The manor, with its ivy-clad walls and shadowed corridors, seemed to pulse with secrets, each guest a potential keeper of truths or lies. Lady Eleanor's decision to host a masquerade ball, ostensibly to lift the gloom, struck Poirot as both bold and suspicious, a stage set for either distraction or revelation. As dusk settled over the Devonshire hills, the grand ballroom of Blackthorn Manor transformed. Chandeliers gleamed like constellations, their light dancing across gilded mirrors and polished oak floors. Servants bustled about, arranging tables laden with crystal flutes and silver trays of delicate cannon. Masks of every variety, feathered, jeweled, and grotesquely ornate, lay ready for the guests, a promise of anonymity that Poirot found both intriguing and perilous. "A mask," he murmured to Captain Hastings, who stood at his side, adjusting. "A simple black domino hides the face, but it reveals the soul." "N'est-ce pas?" Hastings, ever the loyal but slightly baffled companion, nodded. "I suppose so, Poirot, but I don't see how a dance will help us catch a thief or a murderer." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon cher, in a masquerade, one does not merely dance. One observes, one listens, and one uncovers what is hidden beneath the facade. Tonight, the killer may betray themselves, thinking they are unseen." The guests began to gather as the orchestra struck up a waltz, their masks transforming them into a parade of phantoms. The retired Colonel Mortimer, his broad frame unmistakable even beneath a lion's mask, stood near the punch bowl, his voice booming as he recounted a tale of his Indian campaigns to a bored-looking footman. Miss Beatrice Langley, the young heiress, glided through the crowd in a silver mask adorned with peacock feathers, her laughter bright but brittle, as if masking her own fears. The playwright, Roland Vane, wore a harlequin mask that matched his sharp wit, his eyes darting about as he whispered to a masked Lady Poirot did not recognize. And then there was Miss Clara, the governess, her face obscured by a delicate lace mask, her movements cautious, as if she feared being watched. Poirot, clad in a simple but elegant Venetian mask of gold and white, moved through the crowd with the grace of a cat, his small stature belying the sharpness of his gaze. His secret tool, the customized pocket magnifying lens, rested in his waistcoat pocket. But tonight, he relied equally on his little gray cells. The cryptic note from the first night, "The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow," echoed in his mind. Was it a reference to his lens, or something more metaphorical? A psychological ploy, perhaps, designed to unsettle or mislead. The music swelled, and Lady Eleanor, resplendent in a crimson gown and a mask studded with rubies, took the center of the room. "My dear friends," she called, her voice carrying over the chatter. "Let us cast aside our cares and embrace the magic of this night." The guests applauded, though Poirot noted the tension in their clapping, as if each hand struck a note of doubt. As the dancing began, Poirot positioned himself near a marble pillar, his eyes tracking the interplay of guests. Beatrice twirled, with a young man in a jester's mask, her laughter too loud, her grip on his arm too tight. Roland Vane, meanwhile, had cornered Miss Clara near the refreshment table. His gestures animated, his voice low but intense. Poirot edged closer, catching fragments of their conversation. "You can't keep running from it, Clara," Roland was saying, his harlequin mask tilting as he leaned in. "You know what's at stake." Miss Clara's lace mask hid her expression, but her voice was sharp. "And you think you're the one to judge? You, with your secrets and your schemes." Poirot's interest piqued. He slipped his lens from his pocket, pretending to adjust his cufflink as he held it low, catching the glint of light on Roland's mask. A faint stain, barely visible, marked the edge near his lips, a reddish hue that could be wine or something else. Filing this observation away, Poirot moved toward the dance floor, where Colonel Mortimer was now waltzing with Lady Eleanor, his lion's mask incongruous with his stiff military bearing. The evening wore on, the air growing thick with the scent of perfume, wax, and something less tangible suspicion. Perhaps Poirot's attention was drawn to a sudden commotion near the terrace doors. Beatrice Langley stumbled forward, her peacock mask askew, her hand clutching her throat. The glass of wine she held slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. As she collapsed into a chair, gasping, the music faltered, then stopped. Guests crowded around, their masks creating a surreal tableau of concern and curiosity. Poirot pushed through, his voice calm but commanding. "Make way, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur Hastings. Fetch a glass of water." Hastings, ever quick to act, darted off as Poirot knelt beside Beatrice. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes were wide with terror. "The wine," she whispered. It tasted wrong." Poirot's gaze darted to the shattered glass, its contents pooling on the floor. He drew his lens and examined the liquid, noting a faint crystalline residue that sparkled under the chandelier's light. "Cyanide," he murmured, his heart quickening. The heiress had been poisoned, but she was still alive. A miracle, or perhaps a calculated warning. "Stay with her," Poirot instructed a nearby maid, then turned to the crowd. "No one leaves this room until I have spoken with you all. The wine, it was tampered with. We have a poisoner among us." A gasp rippled through the guests, their masks unable to hide their shock. Lady Eleanor, her ruby mask glinting, stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot, surely this is a mistake. Who would do such a thing?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "That, madame, is what I intend to discover." He moved swiftly to the refreshment table, where a servant stood frozen, a tray of wine glasses trembling in his hands. Poirot took one glass, holding it to the light with his lens. The same crystalline residue glinted faintly. "This wine," he said, "was poisoned deliberately. But by whom, and why, Miss Langley?" The servant, a young man with nervous eyes, stammered, I only poured what was in the decanter, sir." Poirot's gaze shifted to the decanter, then to the crowd. Roland Vane, still in his harlequin mask, stood near the table, his hands in his pockets. Poirot approached, his voice low. "Monsieur Vane, you were seen near this table moments before Miss Langley took her glass. And your masket bears a stain that resembles this wine." Roland's eyes widened behind his mask, but his voice was steady. "A stain? Surely you don't think I'd poison someone over a glass of wine, Monsieur Poirot? I was merely sampling the vintage." Poirot's mustache twitched. "We shall see, monsieur, we shall see." As Hastings returned with water for Beatrice, who was now recovering under the care of a doctor summoned from the nearby village, Poirot began questioning the guests. Colonel Mortimer claimed he'd been dancing all evening, his lion's mask making him easy to spot. Miss Clara said she'd been near the terrace, avoiding Roland's accusations. Lady Eleanor, meanwhile, insisted she'd been overseeing the servants, though her eyes darted nervously when Poirot pressed her for details. The night grew late, the ballroom's festive air replaced by a suffocating tension. Poirot, undeterred, continued his inquiries, his lens revealing more than the guests realized. A smudge of powder on Miss Clara's glove matched the residue in the wine. A torn thread from Colonel Mortimer's cuff was found near the decanter, and Roland's mask, when examined closely, bore not only wine, but a trace of the same lavender scent Poirot had detected near the butler's body. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot gathered the guests in a circle, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mesdames et messieurs, tonight has revealed much, but not all. The poison in Miss Langley's wine was no accident. It was a message, a warning. And I, Hercule Poirot, have found a clue to the secret tool mentioned in the note slipped under my door." The guests leaned forward, their masks unable to hide their apprehension. Poirot held up his lens, letting it catch the light. "This tool, it is not merely glass and metal. It is the clarity of observation, the precision of thought. But there is another tool at play, Hera, metaphorical key, one that unlocks the secrets of Blackthorn Manor. And I am close, Mies Amos, very close to finding it." A hush fell over the room, broken only by the distant howl of the wind outside. Poirot's eyes swept over the masked faces, lingering on each suspect. The colonel's bluster, the heiress's fear, the playwright's cunning, the governess's secret soul, were pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. As the guests dispersed, their masks no longer a shield but a burden, Poirot confided to Hastings, "The poison, it was not meant to kill, not yet. It was meant to frighten, to destabilize. The killer plays a dangerous game, but they have underestimated Hercule Poirot." Hastings, loosening his domino mask, shook his head. "I don't know how you do it, Poirot. All these clues, all these lies, it's like trying to catch smoke." Poirot smiled faintly. "Smoke, mon cher, can be seen in the right light, and I have just a tool to find it." The masquerade had ended, but the night was far from over. In the quiet of his room, Poirot sat at a small desk, his lens in hand, examining the fragments of evidence he'd collected. The stained mask, the powdered glove, the torn thread, each was a thread in the tapestry of deceit woven around Blackthorn Manor. The secret tool was no mere object. He was certain it was a method, a manipulation, a shadow cast by a mind as cunning as his own. As he gazed out at the moonlit gardens, Poirot's thoughts turned to the notes, cryptic words, "where truth meets shadow." The masquerade had been a stage where truths were hidden behind masks, but shadows had begun to emerge. The killer, he knew, was watching, waiting for his next move. And Poirot, with his little gray cells and his unyielding resolve, was ready to meet them. Chapter 7. The Hidden Diary. The air in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with suspicion, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets too perilous to be spoken aloud. Hercule Poirot, his small frame poised with an almost feline alertness, stood in the butler's modest quarters, a room tucked away in the manor's east wing. The space was austere: a narrow bed, a chipped wash basin, a single wardrobe with a door that creaked like a warning. Yet it was here, in this unassuming corner of the sprawling estate, that Poirot sensed the pulse of the mystery beating strongest. The events of the past days had woven a tapestry of deceit. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn's missing sapphire necklace, the butler's death in a locked study, and the cryptic note slipped under Poirot's door, proclaiming that the tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow. Each clue seemed to spiral inward, converging on some unseen truth. Now, as the morning sun slanted through a dusty window, Poirot's keen eyes scanned the room for answers. His secret Tula pocket magnifying lens, its silver casing etched with his initials, gleamed in his hand. A silent partner in his quest for clarity, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, stood by the door, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, are you certain there's something to find here? The butler's room seems dreadfully ordinary, hardly the place for a grand revelation." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "Mon ami, it is precisely in the ordinary that the extraordinary hides." The butler, Mr. Grayson was no mere servant. He was, I suspect, a keeper of secrets, perhaps even a pawn in a game he did not fully understand. Hastings raised an eyebrow. A pawn? You think he was involved in a necklace theft? Perhaps, Poirot replied, his voice soft but deliberate. Or perhaps he knew too much about the one who stole it. Come, let us explore this humble abode with the care it deserves. Poirot moved with methodical grace, his lens catching the light as he examined the wardrobe's interior. The butler's close-pressed shirts, a single black suit hung neatly. But a faint irregularity in the wardrobe's back panel caught his eye. He pressed gently, and with a soft click, the panel slid aside, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside lay a small, leather-bound diary, its edges worn as if handled countless times. While Poirot murmured, lifting the diary with gloved hands. The heart of a man's secrets is often found in what he writes when he believes no one is watching. Hastings leaned closer, his curiosity piqued. A diary, Grayson's. What could a butler have to hide? Poirot opened the book, his lens hovering over the first page. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical, but the words carried a weight that belied their simplicity. The entries began months earlier, detailing the daily workings of Blackthorn Manor. But as Poirot flipped through the pages, the tone shifted. References to Lady Eleanor's financial troubles emerged, stark and troubling. March 12th, Poirot read aloud. Her ladyship met with Mr. Carver, the solicitor, again today. She spoke of debts she cannot pay without selling the estate. She fears her nephew, Mr. Rowland, will be ruined if she disinherits him. Yet she speaks of a tool entrusted to a loyal servant. What is this tool? I fear it is a burden I cannot bear. Hastings whistled softly. Disinheriting Rowland. That's the playwright, isn't it? The sullen chap who's been skulking about. Precisement, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. Mr. Rowland Pierce, the nephew who writes plays that are, how do you say, avant-garde. He stands to lose much if Lady Eleanor's fortune slips away. But this tool, it intrigues me. It is mentioned again here. He turned to a later entry, dated only a week before the butler's death. May 3rd. The tool is safe, hidden where none shall find it. Her ladyship trusts me, but I fear betrayal. The vault holds the truth, but the key is not what it seems. The vault, Hastings exclaimed. There's a vault in this manor. Poirot, this could be the key to everything: the necklace, the murder, even that blasted note. Poirot held up a hand, urging calm. Patience, Hastings. A vault, yes, but its contents may not be gold or jewels. The tool mentioned here may be no physical object at all, but a secret, a piece of knowledge that someone in this house would kill to protect. As Poirot continued to examine the diary, his lens caught a faint irregularity on a page near the back. The paper bore the ghost of erased words, barely visible to the naked eye. He tilted the lens, adjusting the angle, until the light revealed the hidden text. With painstaking care, he traced the indentations, reconstructing the erased entry. It read, "The vault lies behind the library's third panel. The key is in the shadow of the rose." Poirot's eyes gleamed. The shadow of the rose, he repeated softly. A poetic phrase, but one that carries meaning. The library, Hastings. We must investigate at once. Before they could leave, a shadow fell across the doorway. Miss Clara, the governess, stood there, her pale face framed by dark curls. Her eyes widened as she saw the diary in Poirot's hands, and for a moment, her composure faltered. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing in Mr. Grayson's room?" Poirot closed the diary with a deliberate snap, his gaze never leaving her. "Mademoiselle Clara, I am seeking the truth, and you, I think, know more of it than you have shared. This diary, it speaks of secrets, of vaults, of a tool that burdens those who keep it. Tell me, what do you know of this?" Clara's hands twisted together, her knuckles white. I don't know what you mean. Mr. Grayson was kind to me, but he kept to himself. If he had secrets, he didn't share them." Poirot tilted his head, his lens catching the light as he studied her. "And yet, Mademoiselle, your presence here, at this precise moment, suggests otherwise. You are afraid. Why? Her eyes darted to the diary, then back to Poirot. You're closer than you know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But you must be careful. Some truths are dangerous. Before Poirot could press further, Clara turned and fled, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Hastings started after her, but Poirot held up a hand. Let her go, mon ami. She will reveal more when she is ready, or when we force her hand. The library of Blackthorn Manor was a cavernous room, its walls lined with books that smelled of leather and time. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and old paper, and a massive fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold and silent. Poirot moved to the third panel mentioned in the diary, a section of oak carved with intricate roses. He ran his fingers along the edges, his lens poised to catch any hidden mechanism. There, he said, pointing to a small indentation shaped like a rosebud. He pressed it, and with a low groan, the panel slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase. Descending into darkness, Hastings peered over his shoulder, his face pale. Good Lord, Poirot, a secret passage. This place is like something out of a Gothic novel. Indeed, Poirot replied, his tone dry. But novels, Hastings, are written by those who understand the human heart, and it is the heart of this mystery we must uncover. The staircase led to a small chamber, its walls damp and lined with stone. At its center stood a vault, its iron door gleaming dully in the light of Poirot's pocket torch. The lock was intricate, designed for a key that was clearly no ordinary one. Poirot examined it with his lens, noting faint scratches around the keyhole marks of someone who had tried and failed to force it open. The shadow of the rose, Poirot murmured. He turned, his eyes scanning the chamber. A small table stood in one corner, holding a single candelabrum shaped like a rose in bloom. He lifted it, and beneath it found a tiny brass key, its head engraved with a rose. Voila, he said, holding it up. The key is indeed in the shadow of the rose. The vault opened with a heavy clunk, revealing a single item inside, a photograph, yellowed with age. It showed a young lady, Eleanor, radiant and smiling, standing beside a man whose face was unfamiliar. Poirot's lens revealed a faint inscription on the back. Truth lies in the shadow of betrayal. Hastings frowned. Who is that man? And why hide a photograph in a vault? Poirot's eyes narrowed. That, mon ami, is the question. This man, he is the shadow in which the truth hides, and I suspect he is the key to the tool mentioned in the diary. As they emerged from the chamber, Poirot's mind raced. The diary, the vault, the photograph, all pointed to a secret buried deep in Lady Eleanor's past. But the governess's fear, her cryptic warning, suggested that the truth was not only hidden but guarded by someone willing to kill, to keep it so. Back in the library, Poirot was about to speak when a sharp cry echoed through the manor. He and Hastings rushed toward the sound, finding Lady Eleanor in the drawing room, her face ashen. In her hand was a letter, its edges trembling. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice breaking. This was left on my desk. It threatens my life. Poirot took the letter, his lens already in hand. The handwriting was different from the butler's, sharp and angular, with a faint smudge of ink that suggested haste. It read, "Leave the past buried, or join it in the grave." Mon Dieu, Poirot said softly. The net tightens. Hastings, someone in this house knows we are close to the truth, and they will stop at nothing to keep it hidden. The day passed in a blur of tension, with the guests avoiding each other's eyes, their alibis fraying under Poirot's relentless scrutiny. The colonel, caught burning papers in the fireplace, claimed they were old military records, but Poirot's lens detected the faint scent of lavender on the ashes, the same scent that lingered near the butler's body. The heiress, Miss Beatrice, admitted to receiving anonymous threats, her voice trembling as she spoke of a shadowy figure watching her from the gardens. And Roland, the playwright, grew increasingly erratic, his sharp wit turning to venom as he accused the others of plotting against him. That evening, As the manor settled into an uneasy silence, Poirot sat in his room, the diary opened before him. He traced the erased entries again, his lens revealing fragments of words that hinted at a family secret tied to the man in the photograph. The tool, he realized, was not merely a physical object, or even a piece of knowledge. It was a weapon, wielded by someone who knew the manor's darkest truths and used them to manipulate its inhabitants. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. It was Miss Clara, her face pale but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I must speak with you. But not here. Meet me in the conservatory at midnight." Poirot nodded, his eyes sharp. "Very well, mademoiselle. But know this, Hercule Poirot does not walk blindly into the shadows." As midnight approached, Poirot made his way to the conservatory, a glass-walled room filled with exotic plants and the heavy scent of jasmine. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, and for a moment, Poirot felt the weight of the manor's secrets pressing against him. Clara stood by a potted fern, her hands clasped tightly. "I couldn't speak earlier," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The butler, Mr. Grayson, he knew something about Lady Eleanor's past, something about her brother." Poirot's eyes widened. Her brother. Lady Eleanor had spoken of no brother. Clara nodded, her gaze distant. "He was disowned years ago, after a scandal. I don't know the details, but Grayson told me he was dangerous. He said the tool was something the brother left behind, way to control the estate." Before Poirot could respond, a rustling sound came from the shadows. He spun, his lens catching a glint of metal, a knife, held by a figure cloaked in darkness. Clara gasped, stepping back, but Poirot remained calm, his voice steady. "Show yourself," he commanded. "The game is over." The figure hesitated, then stepped into the moonlight. It was Roland, his face twisted with desperation. "You're too close, Poirot," he said, his voice shaking. "You should have left it alone." Poirot's lens gleamed as he studied the young man. "And you, monsieur, have played a dangerous part. Tell me, what is this tool you fear I will find?" Roland's grip on the knife faltered, and he sank to his knees, the weapon clattering to the floor. "I didn't kill Grayson," he whispered, "but I know who did. And if you keep digging, they'll kill again." The conservatory fell silent, the weight of Roland's words hanging in the air. Poirot knew the truth was within reach, but the path to it was fraught with peril. The secret tool was no mere object, it was a web of lies, spun by a master manipulator who had orchestrated theft, murder, and betrayal. And as the clock struck midnight, Poirot vowed to unravel it, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. The vault of secret stair in Blackthorn Manor was thick with suspicion, a miasma that clung to the ornate wallpaper and seeped into the crevices of the ancient oak paneling. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the library, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the Persian rug, his mustache twitching as he surveyed the room. The events of the past days, the stolen sapphire necklace, the butler's death in a locked study, the poisoned wine at the masquerade, had woven a tapestry of deceit that demanded unraveling. His fingers brushed the pocket of his immaculate suit, where his customized magnifying lens rested, a silent partner in his pursuit of truth. But today, his little gray cells were restless, sensing the pulse of a deeper secret thrumming beneath the manor's surface. The library was a cavern of knowledge, its towering shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. A faint scent of old paper and wax polish mingled with the lingering trace of lavender, a clue that had haunted Poirot since the butler's death. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the room, settling on a section of the wall behind Lady Eleanor's mahogany desk. The paneling there seemed slightly askew, a hairline crack betraying its alignment with the rest. He approached, his steps deliberate, and pressed his fingers against the wood. It yielded with a soft click, revealing a hidden recess. Inside was a vault, its iron door cold and unyielding. Poirot's heart quickened, not with excitement, but with the calm certainty of a man who knew he was close to a revelation. The vault was locked, but the mechanism was old, its keyhole worn from years of use. From his pocket, he produced a small leather case containing an array of delicate tools not the crude implements of a thief, but the precise instruments of a detective who respected the art of discovery. With a few deft movements, the lock surrendered, and the door creaked open. The vault was disappointingly sparse. No glittering jewels, no stacks of incriminating documents, solely a single photograph, yellowed at the edges, resting on the bare, metal floor. Poirot lifted it carefully, as if it were a fragile relic. The image showed a young Lady Eleanor, her face radiant with youth, standing beside a man whose features were sharp and intense, his eyes shadowed by a trilby hat. The background was a blurred garden, but the intimacy of their pose suggested a bond deeper than friendship. Poirot turned the photograph over, his lens catching a faint inscription in faded ink. Truth lies in the shadow of betrayal. He sat at the desk, the photograph before him, and let his mind work. The inscription was cryptic, but it echoed. The note slipped under his door on the first night. The tool lies hidden where truth meets shadow. Was this photograph the tool? Or was it, as he suspected, a piece of a larger puzzle, a clue to the psychological machinations at play in Blackthorn Manor? The man in the image was unfamiliar, yet his presence felt like a specter haunting the estate. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Interest," he called, slipping the photograph into his pocket. Captain Hastings entered, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Poirot, you've been in here for hours. The guests are getting restless. Lady Eleanor's talking about canceling the rest of the weekend, and the Colonel's pacing like a caged tiger." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Mon ami, restlessness is the natural state of the guilty. Let them pace. It sharpens their unease, and unease reveals truth." Hastings frowned, running a hand through his hair. "You found something, didn't you? In that vault you were poking around." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A photograph, Hastings, a single image, yet it speaks volumes. But we must proceed with care. The killer or killers among us are watching, and this manor is a labyrinth of secrets." Before Hastings could press further, a sharp cry echoed from the hall. Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his agility belying his fastidious appearance. They hurried toward the sound, finding Miss Clara, the governess, standing at the foot of the grand staircase, her face pale as moonlight. Her hands clutched a crumpled letter, and her eyes darted toward the shadows as if expecting them to move. "Monsieur Poirot," she gasped, "I found this in my room. It was on my pillow." Poirot took the letter, his gloved fingers handling it with care. The paper was cheap, the ink smudged, but the message was clear. "Leave Blackthorn Manor tonight, or the truth of your past will be your ruin." His lens revealed no fingerprints, only a faint trace of charcoal dust, suggesting the letter had been handled near a fireplace. The lavender scent was absent, but the threat was unmistakable. "Miss Clara," Poirot said, his voice calm but probing, "who in this house knows of your past?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No one. I've told no one. But someone has been watching me. I feel it." Hastings stepped forward, his tone gentle. "You're safe now, Miss Clara. Poirot will get to the bottom of this." Poirot's gaze remained fixed on the governess. "Mademoiselle, fear is a powerful motivator, but so is truth. If you withhold anything, you aid the one who threatens you." Clara's lips trembled, but she nodded. "I'll tell you what I can, but not here. Not with everyone listening." They moved to a small parlor, its windows shuttered against the gray Devonshire sky. Clara sat, her hands twisting in her lap, and began to speak. 5 years ago, I was involved in a scandal in London. A man, a gentleman I trusted, betrayed me. I was dismissed from my position, my name tarnished. Lady Eleanor gave me a chance here, but if that past were exposed, it would ruin me." Poirot's lens was already at work, examining the letter again. A faint watermark caught his eye, barely visible, a crest, resembling the Blackthorn family's. "This paper," he said, "it is not common. It comes from this house. Someone close to Lady Eleanor wrote this." Clara's breath hitched. "But who, and why?" "That," Poirot said, "is what we shall discover." The day unfolded in a series of tense encounters. Poirot summoned the Colonel, whose ruddy face was flushed with indignation. "This is preposterous, Poirot. I'm a man of honor, not some skulking letter writer." Poirot's lens hovered over the Colonel's hands, noting a faint smudge of charcoal on his cuff. "Colonel, you were seen burning papers in the fireplace last night, papers that carried the scent of lavender. Care to explain?" The Colonel blustered, his mustache quivering. "Old military records, nothing more. I burned them to clear space." "You're barking up the wrong tree, man." Poirot's smile was thin. "The tree, Colonel, is never wrong. It is the branches that deceive." Next, Poirot confronted the heiress, Miss Beatrice Langley, whose delicate features belied a sharp tongue. She lounged in the drawing room, her silk dress catching the light. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm tired of these accusations. I was nearly poisoned. Remember, I'm a victim, not a villain." Poirot's lens examined her gloves, noting a faint stain of wine, possibly from the masquerade. "Mademoiselle, victims and villains are not so easily distinguished. You received anonymous threats, yes, yet you did not share them with me until now." "Why?" Beatrice's eyes flickered. "I thought they were a prank. I didn't want to cause a fuss." "A fuss," Poirot repeated, his tone dry. "A curious choice when lives are at stake." The playwright, Mr. Julian Harrow, was the most elusive. Poirot found him in the conservatory, scribbling in a notebook. The man's dark eyes were guarded, his fingers stained with ink. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot began, "your alibi for the butler's death rests on a clock that was stopped. Yet you insist you heard it strike midnight. A contradiction." Harrow's pen paused. "I was mistaken, perhaps. The night was chaotic." Poirot's lens caught a glimpse of the notebook's pages, sketches of the manor's layout, including a detailed map of the study. "You have a keen interest in this house's secrets. Monsieur, what do you seek?" Harrow closed the notebook with a snap. "Inspiration, Poirot. Nothing more." As evening fell, Poirot returned to the library, the photograph weighing heavily in his pocket. He summoned Lady Eleanor, who entered with the grace of a woman accustomed to command, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "Monsieur, this house is unraveling. First my necklace, then poor Edmund, and now these threats. What have you found?" Poirot held up the photograph. "This, Madame, a young man, standing with you in happier times." "Who is he?" Lady Eleanor's face drained of color. "My business partner, Charles Vane. He disappeared 20 years ago after a financial dispute. I thought him dead." Poirot's lens traced the inscription again. "Truth lies in the shadow of betrayal," he murmured. "Madame, this man may be the key to your troubles." "Did he know of this vault?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He helped design it. But he's gone. Monsieur Poirot. Surely he cannot be involved." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "In this house, Madame, the past is never truly gone." That night, Poirot lay awake in his guest room, the photograph on his bedside table. The manor creaked around him, its secrets whispering in the shadows. His lens had revealed much charcoal dust, wine stains, hidden maps, but the secret tool remained elusive. Was it the photograph itself, the vault, or something more intangible, a psychological gambit designed to fracture the household? A soft rustle at the door snapped him from his thoughts. He rose, silent as a cat, and found another note slipped beneath the door. This one was written in a hurried hand. "The shadow moves at midnight. Beware the vault." Poirot's pulse quickened. He checked his watch. 11:45. Dressing swiftly, he slipped his lens into his pocket and crept toward the library. The manor was silent, the guests presumably asleep, but the air felt charged, as if the house itself were holding its breath. In the library, the vault door stood ajar. Poirot's lens caught a glint of metal inside a small key, overlooked in his earlier search. He reached for it, but a shadow moved behind him. He spun, his cane raised, to find Miss Clara, her face ghostly in the moonlight. "Monsieur," she whispered, "I saw someone enter the library." I followed, but a crash interrupted her, echoing from the hidden passage behind the vault. Poirot gestured for silence and stepped into the passage, his lens illuminating the narrow corridor. Footprints in the dust led to a concealed door, opening into the garden. There, under the moon's cold light, stood a figure cloaked in black, holding a small box. As Poirot called, his voice sharp. The figure froze, then turned, revealing the face of the colonel. His eyes were wild, the box clutched tightly. "Poirot, you don't understand. This isn't what it seems." "Explain, then," Poirot said, his lens trained on the box. The colonel's shoulders sagged. "It's Charles Vane's. I found it in the vault years ago, after he vanished. It contains documents, proof of his betrayal." Poirot's mind raced. The photograph, the inscription, the threats all pointed to a past that refused to stay buried. "Colonel," he said, "you will come with me." The truth, it seems, is no longer content to hide in shadows. As they returned to the manor, Poirot's thoughts crystallized. The secret tool was not a physical object, but a scheme to sow distrust, to pit guest against guest, until the manor collapsed under its own secrets. The photograph was a catalyst, the vault a stage, and Charles Vane, whether alive or dead, was the specter driving the chaos. The chapter closed with Poirot standing in the library, the key in his hand, the colonel's confession ringing in his ears. The guests were summoned for breakfast, unaware that Poirot was closing in. His lens had uncovered clues, but his little gray cells were now his true weapon, poised to unravel the web of lies that bound Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 9. The False Confession. The storm rolled in with a vengeance, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring to keep the secrets of Blackthorn Manor locked within its ancient walls. Rain lashed against the tall, arched windows, each gust rattling the panes like a restless spirit demanding entry. The air inside the manor was thick with tension, the kind that clung to the skin and sharpened every glance. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace in the grand drawing room, his small, precise hands clasped behind his back, his mustache impeccably groomed despite the chaos of the past days. His eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the faces of the assembled guests, each one a study in guarded unease. The governess, Miss Clara Wren, sat rigidly on a velvet-upholstered chair, her pale hands folded tightly in her lap. Her auburn hair, usually pinned with meticulous care, was slightly askew, a single strand curling defiantly against her temple. The retired Colonel, Reginald Hawthorne, paced near the window, his heavy boots thudding against the polished floor, his weathered face set in a scowl. Miss Beatrice Langley, the young heiress, lounged on a chaise longue, her delicate fingers toying with a pearl bracelet, her green eyes darting nervously. The playwright, Mr. Lionel Vance, leaned against a bookcase, his thin lips curled in a half-smirk, though his knuckles were white where they gripped his cigarette case. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn herself, the mistress of the manor, sat at the head of the room, her regal posture belying the faint tremor in her hands as she clutched a lace handkerchief. Poirot cleared his throat, a sound so soft it might have been mistaken for a sigh, yet it commanded the room's attention as surely as a gavel. "Mies Amos," he began, his voice calm but laced with an edge of steel, "we find ourselves at a crossroads. The events of Blackthorn Manor, the theft of the sapphire necklace, the death of the butler, Mr. Grayson, and the attempt on Mademoiselle Langley's life form, a tapestry of deceit. But now, a new thread has emerged, one that threatens to unravel the entire design." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking to one another, searching for the betrayer in their midst. Poirot's gaze settled on Miss Clara, whose breath hitched almost imperceptibly. "Miss Wren," he said, stepping forward, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood, "you have something to confess, Nan." Clara's lips parted, but no sound came at first. Her hands tightened in her lap, the knuckles blanching. "Monsieur Poirot," she said at last, her voice low but steady, "I cannot bear the weight of suspicion any longer. I stole Lady Eleanor's necklace." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's hand flew to her throat, as if she could still feel the absence of the sapphire's cool weight. Beatrice sat upright, her bracelet forgotten, while Colonel Hawthorne stopped pacing, his bushy eyebrows rising in surprise. Lionel Vance's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of something darker, calculation, perhaps, or fear. Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. A bold confession, Miss Wren, but let us proceed with care. Why did you steal the necklace, and how? Clara's eyes dropped to the floor, her shoulders hunching slightly. It was to protect Lady Eleanor, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I discovered that someone was blackmailing her. They demanded the necklace as payment to keep silent about a scandal from her past. I took it from her safe to give to them, to spare her the shame. Lady Eleanor's face paled, her handkerchief crumpling in her fist. Clara, she murmured, you knew of this. Why did you not come to me? Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I couldn't bear to see you humiliated, my lady. You've been so kind to me, taking me in when no one else would. I thought I could handle it discreetly. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to rise. And this blackmailer, Miss Wren, who are they? Clara shook her head, her lips trembling. I don't know their name. I received anonymous notes, slipped under my door. They instructed me to leave the necklace in a hollow tree by the old mill. I did as they asked, but I swear, I had nothing to do with Mr. Grayson's death. The room fell silent, save for the relentless drumming of the rain. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind clearly turning over her words, like a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. A most convenient story, he said softly. And yet, I wonder, how did you open the safe? Miss Wren, it is a formidable mechanism. Nan, one does not simply pry it open with a hairpin. Clara swallowed hard, her fingers twisting the fabric of her skirt. I watched Lady Eleanor open it once. She was distracted, and I saw the combination. I memorized it. Lady Eleanor frowned, her voice sharp. You spied on me, Clara. It was not spying, Clara protested, her voice rising. I only wanted to protect you. Colonel Hawthorne snorted, crossing his arms. Protect her, by stealing her jewels. A likely story. Sounds to me like you saw a chance to line your own pockets. Girl, enough. Poirot's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He reached into his waistcoat pocket and produced his secret, Tula Small, exquisitely crafted magnifying lens, its silver rim glinting in the firelight. Let us examine the facts, not fling accusations like stones. Miss Wren, you claim to have acted alone in the theft, yet you deny involvement in the murder of Mr. Grayson. But there is a connection, is there not? A thread that binds these crimes together. He crossed the room to a small writing desk, where Captain Hastings, his loyal friend, had laid out a collection of evidence gathered over the past days. Among the items was a crumpled receipt, its edges slightly singed, as if someone had tried to burn it but thought better of it. Poirot held it up, his lens poised over the paper. This receipt, he said, was found in your room, Miss Wren. It is from a jeweler in the nearby village of Ashwick, dated 3 days before the theft. It details the purchase of a sapphire pendant. Remarkable coincidence. Nan. Clara's face drained of color. I don't know how that got there, she stammered. I've never been to Ashwick. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign that he had caught the scent of a lie. Raymond, then how do you explain the handwriting, which matches the notes you claim to have received from this mysterious blackmailer, and the faint trace of lavender, Miss Wren in the paper? Clara's hands flew to her face, her composure crumbling. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't forge anything. Someone must have planted it. Beatrice leaned forward, her voice dripping with suspicion. Planted? Oh, please, you're caught, Clara. Just admit you're in over your head. Lionel Vance lit a cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke. She's not wrong, he drawled. You've been skulking about this house like a ghost. Clara, always listening, always watching. Makes one wonder what else you're hiding. Poirot turned to Vance, his eyes glinting. And you, Monsieur Vance, are not above suspicion. Your alibi for the night of Mr. Grayson's death is, shall we say, less than robust. A clock that did not chime, a story that shifts like sand. Vance's smirk returned, though it was strained. I've nothing to hide, Poirot. Unlike some, his gaze flicked to Clara. Then to the colonel, who bristled. "Watch your tongue, boy," Hawthorne growled. "I've served king and country longer than you've been scribbling your little plays. If anyone's hiding something, it's that governess. She's got shifty eyes." Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I won't sit here and be insulted," she cried. "I stole the necklace, yes, but I did it for Lady Eleanor. I had no part in the murder, and I won't be blamed for it." Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Sit, Miss Wren. We are not finished. There is more to your story, I think. You said the butler, Mr. Grayson, was your accomplice in the theft. Tell me, how did he become involved?" Clara sank back into her chair, her shoulders slumping. He found me at the safe," she admitted. "I was struggling with the combination, and he caught me. But instead of turning me in, he offered to help. He said he'd keep my secret if I gave him a share of the necklace's value once it was sold. I didn't trust him, but I had no choice." Lady Eleanor gasped, her hand clutching her chest. "Grayson, my trusted butler. This is unthinkable." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "And yet, Miss Wren, you claim someone else killed him. Why, if he was your accomplice, what motive could another have to silence him?" Clara's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I heard him arguing with someone that night in the study. I couldn't make out the words, but it was heated. Then the gunshot." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling like dust. The storm outside roared, louder, a flash of lightning illuminating the room in stark white, casting long shadows across the faces of the guests. Poirot paced slowly, his lens still in hand, his mind weaving together the fragments of truth and deception. "Let us consider," he said, his voice measured. "The necklace is stolen, the butler is dead, and an attempt is made on Mademoiselle Langley's life. These are not random acts, Mies, Amos. They are the work of a mind that seeks to control, to manipulate. But to what end? Power, revenge, or perhaps inheritance?" His eyes flicked to Lady Eleanor, who stiffened. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "you cannot think I am involved in this." "Not you, my lady," Poirot said gently. "But there are others who may covet what is yours. The diary we found in Mr. Grayson's quarters spoke of your plans to disinherit your nephew, Monsieur Vance. And yet, there is another figure, a shadow from the past, mentioned in that diary. A tool entrusted to a loyal servant. Could it be that this tool is not an object, but a person? A person who moves unseen, pulling the strings of this deadly puppet show." Vance's cigarette paused halfway to his lips. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. I'm no murderer." "Perhaps not," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "But you are a writer, Monsieur Vance. You understand the art of crafting a story, of misdirection. And you were seen near the study before the murder, were you not?" Vance's eyes narrowed. "By whom?" "That heiress, always poking her nose where it doesn't belong." Beatrice flushed, her voice sharp. "I saw what I saw, Lionel. You were lurking by the study door, looking guilty as sin. Enough." Colonel Hawthorne barked, slamming his fist on a side table. "This is getting us nowhere. Poirot, if you've got evidence, show it. Otherwise, stop stirring the pot." Poirot smiled faintly, unperturbed. "Patience, Colonel. The evidence is here, in the details. The receipt in Miss Wren's room, the lavender scent, the stopped clock, the hidden passage. They all point to a truth that is close, so very close. But we must be precise, for the killer is clever, and they are still among us." A sudden crash of thunder punctuated his words, making Beatrice jump. Clara's hands trembled, and Vance stubbed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. Lady Eleanor's eyes were wide, her composure fraying at the edges. The colonel muttered something under his breath, his face red with frustration. Poirot turned to Hastings, who had been watching the scene with quiet intensity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, "fetch the small leather case from my room. There is something I must examine more closely." Hastings nodded and hurried out, leaving the room in a state of uneasy anticipation. Poirot returned to the writing desk, picking up the receipt once more. He held it to the light, his lens gliding over the paper surface, revealing faint indentations, marks of a pen that had pressed too hard on another sheet, leaving a ghost of its words behind. "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "Very interesting." When Hastings returned with the case, Poirot opened it to reveal a collection of tools, a small brush, a vial of powder, and a set of fine tweezers. He dusted the receipt with the powder, revealing a clearer imprint of the hidden writing. "A name," he said softly. "Not Miss Wren's, but another. A name that ties this receipt to someone else in this house." Clara's eyes widened. "Who?" she demanded. "Who is it?" Poirot shook his head, his expression enigmatic. "Not yet, Miss Wren. The storm has trapped us here, and the killer knows they cannot escape, but they will try to cover their tracks. We must be vigilant." He turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. "Tonight, Mies, Amos, I ask you to remain in your rooms. Lock your doors, and do not open them until morning. The truth is near, and I, Hercule Poirot, will bring it to light." As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls, Poirot lingered by the fireplace, his lens still in hand. Hastings approached, his brow furrowed. "Poirot," he said quietly, "do you really think Clara's confession is false?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Monsieur Hastings, a confession is only as true as the heart that speaks. If Miss Wren is hiding something, but so are they all. The receipt, the lavender, the hidden passage. They are pieces of a puzzle, but the picture is not yet complete. The secret tool mentioned in that first note is the key. And I believe it is not a thing, but a method way of thinking that the killer uses to weave their lies." Hastings shivered, glancing at the rain-streaked windows. "And you think the killer is still here, among us?" Poirot nodded, his voice low. "Oh yes. They are watching, waiting. But they cannot hide from the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot. Tomorrow, mon ami, we will set a trap and the truth will come, crawling out of the shadows." The storm raged on, the manor groaning under its assault, as Poirot stood alone, his mind a whirl of deduction, his lens a silent partner in the hunt for truth. The false confession had opened a door, but what lay beyond was a labyrinth of secrets, and only Poirot could navigate its twists to find the killer lurking within. Chapter 10. The clockwork, Clutha air in Blackthorn Manor hung heavy with suspicion, as if the walls themselves whispered secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. The storm outside had begun to gather strength, its first tentative raindrops pattering against the tall, arched windows of the library where Hercule Poirot stood. His silhouette, sharp against the flickering glow of a single candelabrum, his eyes, keen as a hawk's, were fixed on the ornate grandfather clock in the corner, its hands frozen at 11:45. The clock's silence was a puzzle in itself, a mechanical heart that had stopped beating at a moment that seemed to hold the key to the manor's mysteries. Poirot's fingers, gloved in their habitual elegance, traced the edge of his pocket magnifying lens. The secret tool that had served him so well thus far. The lens, a bespoke creation from a Parisian craftsman, was no mere trinket. Its crystal clarity revealed details invisible to the untrained eye, and Poirot wielded it with the precision of a surgeon. He had already uncovered the faint thread of silk in the safe's hinge, the inconsistencies in the butler's suicide note, and the coded phrases in Miss Clara's letter. Now, as he approached the clock, he sensed it held a truth that could unravel the tangled web of lies spun around Blackthorn Manor. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, hovered nearby, his brow furrowed with the weight of the case. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "you've been staring at that clock for a good 10 minutes. What's so special about it? The playwright swore he heard it strike midnight, but you said it was stopped at 11:45. Surely it's just a broken mechanism." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Monsieur Hastings, a clock does not stop of its own accord, not in a house as meticulously maintained as this one. No, this clock was stopped deliberately, and in that act lies a clue most vital. The question is not why it stopped, but who stopped it, and what truth they sought to conceal. He stepped closer, his lens glinting as he held it to the clock's face. The glass was pristine, the Roman numerals etched with a craftsman's care. But the hands, those heavy, brass hands, seemed out of place, as if they had been forced into their current position. Poirot's lens moved lower, to the intricate gears visible through a small maintenance panel at the clock's base. There, caught in the delicate teeth of a cog, was something that made his heart quicken. A tiny, dislodged gear, its edge bent as if struck with force. Poirot murmured, his voice a mix of triumph and curiosity. This gear, it is not merely broken, it has been sabotaged. Someone wished to ensure this clock would not speak its truth. Hastings leaned in, squinting. Sabotaged, but why? To throw off the timeline of the butler's death. Perhaps, Poirot replied, his tone measured. Or perhaps to create a false timeline altogether. The playwright, Monsieur Roland, insists he heard the clock strike midnight, yet the clock was stopped 15 minutes earlier. This discrepancy, it is no accident. It is a thread in the tapestry of deception we must now unravel. The library door creaked open, and Lady Eleanor Blackthorne entered, her silver hair catching the candlelight like a halo. Her face, usually a mask of aristocratic composure, was etched with strain. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "have you found anything to explain this madness? My butler dead, my necklace stolen, my guests turning on one another, it is unbearable." Poirot turned, his eyes softening but never losing their sharpness. "Madame, the truth is like a fine wine, it requires time to breathe. But rest assured, Hercule Poirot is close to uncorking the bottle. This clock, it holds a secret, and I shall discover it before the night is through." Lady Eleanor nodded, though her hands twisted nervously in the folds of her gown. "I trust you, Monsieur Poirot. But please, be swift. I fear what may happen if this continues." As she left, Poirot returned his attention to the clock, his mind racing. The stopped clock was no mere detail. It was a deliberate act, a manipulation of time itself. The butler's death, officially a suicide, had been staged in a locked study. But the hidden passage Poirot had discovered behind the bookcase suggested otherwise. The passage led to the governess's room, a fact that had not escaped his notice. Miss Clara, with her lavender scent and coded letters, was entangled in this mystery. But whether as victim or villain remained unclear. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, quick, purposeful steps that belonged to someone who did not wish to be heard. He slipped the lens into his pocket and turned just as Miss Clara appeared at the library's threshold, her face pale, her eyes darting like a cornered animal's. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I must speak with you, alone." Hastings bristled, his protective instincts flaring. "Now, see here, Miss Clara, anything you have to say can be said in front of me." Poirot raised a hand, silencing his friend. "Nan, Hastings, Mademoiselle Clara, you have my attention. Speak." The governess hesitated, her fingers clutching a small, embroidered handkerchief. I know you suspect me, Monsieur Poirot. The lavender, the passage, the letter, it all points to me. But I swear, I did not kill the butler. I stole the necklace, yes, but only to protect Lady Eleanor. The butler, he was blackmailing me, threatening to expose my past. But someone else killed him, someone who knew about the passage. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind cataloging her words. "And this someone, mademoiselle, do you have a name?" She shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, but I saw a shadow in the passage that night. It wasn't the butler, it was someone taller, broader. I thought it was the colonel, but I can't be sure." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor is noted. But tell me, why did you not speak of this shadow before?" "I was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid they'd come for me next." As she fled the room, her footsteps echoing down the corridor, Hastings turned to Poirot, exasperation clear in his voice. "She's lying, isn't she? Trying to throw suspicion elsewhere." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his gaze returning to the clock. Or perhaps she speaks a partial truth, which is the most dangerous kind. Come, Hastings, we must explore this passage further. The clock has told us one secret. The passage may reveal another. They moved to the bookcase, where Poirot had previously discovered the hidden latch. With a soft click, the panel swung open, revealing a narrow, stone-walled passage that smelled of damp earth and secrets. Poirot lit a small lantern, its light casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The passage was tight, barely wide enough for two men to walk abreast, and it sloped downward, leading toward the governess's room. As they navigated the twisting corridor, Poirot's lens was out again, scanning the walls and floor for any trace of evidence. Near a sharp bend, he paused, his lens catching a glint of something metallic embedded in a crack in the stone. He knelt, carefully extracting a small, silver cufflink engraved with the letter R. "Roland," Hastings said, his voice tight. "The playwright. This must be his. Or it was placed here to make us believe it is his." Poirot cautioned, "The hand that weaves this web is cunning. Hastings, we must not leap to conclusions." The passage ended at a wooden panel that opened into Miss Clara's room, just as Poirot had suspected. The room was modest, its furnishings simple. But Poirot's lens quickly found something out of place, a single, crumpled page tucked beneath the mattress. He unfolded it, revealing a sketch of the manor's layout, with the study and the hidden passage clearly marked. In the margin, in a hurried scrawl, were the words, "The tool is time." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The tool is time," he repeated softly. "This, Hastings, is no mere metaphor. The killer has manipulated time itself, using the clock to create a false narrative. The butler's death did not occur at midnight, as the playwright claims, but earlier perhaps at 11:45, when the clock was stopped." Hastings frowned. "But why? What does the killer gain by shifting the timeline?" "Alibis, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "The timeline dictates who could have been where and when. By stopping the clock, the killer ensures that we question the wrong moments, the wrong movements. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily misled." They returned to the library, where Poirot began to pace, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The cufflink, the passage, the sketch, the stopped clock were pieces of a puzzle that was beginning to take shape. The playwright, Roland, had claimed to hear the clock strike midnight, but the clock was stopped. Miss Clara had admitted to theft but denied murder. Yet the passage linked her room to the crime scene, and the colonel, with his burned papers and evasive manner, remained a shadow in the background. His military precision, perhaps too perfect. Poirot stopped pacing and turned to Hastings, his eyes alight with purpose. "We must set a trap, Hastings. The killer believes they have outwitted us, but they have overlooked one thing. Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed. Tomorrow night, we shall announce that I have found the secret tool mentioned in the note, a tool that will expose the killer. And when the guilty party moves to silence me, we shall be ready." Hastings nodded, though his face betrayed his unease. "And what if the killer doesn't take the bait?" Poirot's smile was almost mischievous. "They will, mon ami, for the guilty cannot resist the lure of their own secrets. Now, let us prepare. The clockwork clue has set the stage, and the final act is about to begin." The next day dawned gray and stormy, the rain now a steady drumbeat against the manor's windows. The guests were restless, their nerves frayed by the mounting tension. Poirot, however, was a picture of calm, his every movement deliberate as he gathered the household in the drawing-room that evening. The candelabras cast long shadows, and the air was thick with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice commanding the room, "I have made a discovery most significant. The secret tool mentioned in the note slipped under my door is not merely a metaphor, nor is it my trusty lens, though it has served me well. No, the secret tool is something far more tangible, a key to unlocking the truth of the butler's death and the theft of Lady Eleanor's necklace. Tomorrow, I shall reveal this tool and, with it, the identity of the killer." A murmur rippled through the room. The colonel's jaw tightened. his eyes narrowing. Miss Clara clutched her handkerchief, her knuckles white. Roland, the playwright, shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on his knee. The heiress, still pale from her brush with poison, stared at Poirot with a mix of hope and fear. As the guests dispersed, Poirot whispered to Hastings, "Observe them closely tonight, mon ami. The guilty will not sleep easily." That night, Poirot and Hastings took turns keeping watch in the library, hidden behind a heavy curtain. The hours ticked by, the storm outside growing fiercer, its thunder rattling the manor's ancient bones. At 2 a.m., a soft creak broke the silence, the sound of the hidden passage opening. A figure emerged, cloaked in shadow, moving with the stealth of a predator. Poirot's lens, held to his eye, caught the glint of a blade in the figure's hand. "Hastings," Poirot whispered. "Now." Hastings sprang forward, tackling the figure to the ground. The blade clattered across the floor, and in the dim light, Poirot saw the face of the intruder, Roland, the playwright, his eyes wild with panic. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Roland cried as Hastings restrained him. "I only wanted to stop you from finding the diary. It has secrets that could ruin me." Poirot stepped forward, his lens still in hand. "Monsieur Roland, the diary is already in my possession, and its secrets are no longer yours to guard. But tell me, was it you who stopped the clock? Was it you who killed the butler?" Roland shook his head, his voice breaking. "No, I swear it," I argued with him. "Yes, over the diary. He was going to sell it to the highest bidder. But I didn't kill him. I saw someone else in the passage that night, a man, taller than me, with a military bearing. I thought it was the colonel." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the cufflink, monsieur, the one with your initial." "It's not mine," Roland insisted. "Someone planted it to frame me." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The trap had sprung, but the true killer remained elusive. Roland's fear was genuine, but his story raised new questions. The colonel, with his burned papers and military precision, was a likely suspect, yet the lavender scent pointed to Miss Clara. And what of the heiress, whose alibis crumbled under scrutiny? As Hastings escorted Roland to his room, under strict orders to remain there, Poirot returned to the clock, his lens once more tracing its gears. The tiny, dislodged gear seemed to mock him, a silent challenge to uncover the truth. The storm outside raged on, and Poirot knew that time, the true secret tool, was running out. He turned to the window, the rain streaking down like tears, and murmured to himself, "The clockwork clue has spoken, but the killer's hand is still hidden. Tomorrow, Hercule Poirot shall pull back the curtain and reveal the face of deceit." The night stretched on, and the manor held its breath, waiting for the final act of Poirot's deadly game.